Welcome once again to our weekly podcast here on TCP. It is episode number 189. So we're reaching 200 soon. Like there's 11 more until we get to 200, which means you're not going to see episode 200 until sometime next year, when inevitably we will be. And who knows when that will happen? I don't know. November apparently if we're on schedule. But I mean,
Wild.
dude, the league is well and truly over by November, so I
Yeah.
don't know about that.
Yeah. I
What a
mean,
world.
we got to see what happens in the off season, right? Maybe there's stuff to talk about.
Special off-season episodes, a couple of those.
It's going to be
Who knows?
interesting, like how and when the transfer market is going to activate, right? So we'll see.
Activates like July next year. Like,
Pretty much.
We'll see.
God bless.
oh god. Well, there's quite a few things to go over this week in terms of the fact that we just had the conclusion of the Countdown Cup. Very exciting stuff. Great grand finals, one of the best grand finals. We have the MVP ballots submitted, all done. We'll be going over those today as well, just talking over who our final choices are for all the awards: Role Star, Coach of the Year, Rookie of the Year, and MVP. We talked plenty about them, but previously it was always like speculation on like, oh, who would you vote for? Like, who's probably your front runner? Now it's just like, no, who did you vote for? Who have you actually put down on your list? Is where we're going to. So I think a special episode in that regard as well, so we can actually finalize where things are and how a lot of that's going to go. Before we get too deep, though, gentlemen, I have to do some quick shout outs here. I do want to thank our supporters here, our patrons. Episode 189 is brought to you by Battle Crab, Refined Bean, Bronzebot Boohal, Chare, Chris R34444, Fable Steven, Hunter Tane, Casher67, Lolshin, Rex Saint, Sir Girth, a lot, Wilma D, Yiska's all percentage shower gel, and your misery, and obviously our lovely members on YouTube as well. We love you guys as well. So 189, guys. First thing on the list here is there was a bit of news that dropped really recently, and I guess we're fortunate enough to catch this news and talk about it. And that is that the Hangzhou Spark have made a termination of a contract. I was about to say roster move, but it just sounds like that doesn't. It's not quite accurate. It sounds like misleading. You know, like, oh, who did they acquire? Like, oh, they dropped somebody. No, something happened. Something negative really happened here, and so MCD is out of the picture after some recent controversy, to put it lightly. The tweet basically says, today the Hangzhou Spark was made aware of an incident involving MCD's in-game behavior. MCD's action and comments has broken the stipulation of the player contract. It also against, that's just how they wrote it, the Hangzhou Spark's team value. His action was not consistent with the expectation of the Hangzhou Spark players and staff. As stated, MCD's contract will be terminated from today. He will no longer serve the role of Hangzhou Spark's flex support player by the Hangzhou Spark organization. Context here, guys, is that he had some discriminatory words said in ranked towards Chinese players. I think Farway, who's the flex supporter of the Chengdu Hunters, was the target of that. And after this news came out as well, Gaga went on his socials to say like, oh, I wonder, how many other players he's talked this way to. Apparently, this is not a one-time thing. This is not a first offense. So MCD, for behavioral issues, has been removed from the team.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think MCD's had a quite the bang up season thus far. But yeah, when you say silly things like that, you gotta face the punishment. And yep, that's thumbs the brakes. Can't be doing stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean,
Cool.
we
Move it on then. No,
Do-
Yiska, please.
it's always like such an awkward situation to comment on something. Like, did you guys watch the clip in question that was posted as the reason?
No, I actually didn't. I didn't know there was a clip. There was a clip.
Yeah, there was a clip of him being in a ranked game, and he actually in English says, like,
Wow.
which is weird. Why would you go to English, bro? Like,
I think that's how they calm. I don't know.
Is it? Maybe. I'm not sure. Yeah, but like, it's like, of course there could be language barrier issues, but given all the context, it's just very clearly like a racist remark towards like specifically like attacking a player based on his nationality, which is not okay, right? Other players have come out, said as much, that this is, not just like the one instance. So yeah, I mean, you gotta respond if the evidence is actually as it is presented at the moment. Which, to be fair, like no guarantees here. Like I haven't looked into this at all beyond watching the clip, which was, I think it was on Weibo.
I just saw it. I just found the clip.
And yeah, I don't know. Like it's unfortunate because I thought like MCD was possibly the best player on the Spark this season.
Could argue, I guess.
Wow, you're kind of just robbing Shy of there a little bit, but other than that, we'll say after Shy maybe.
After Shy, and I mean, you might have to consider that MCD also played pretty much the entire season, right? Before the 2 weeks ago.
True.
But yeah, like he was certainly one of the characters on that team that actually inspired some confidence. And yes, you have Coldest as a backup there, and this is once again where like a big roster comes in pretty handy. You just have the redundancy for when, like, this is what we're talking about.
For scandals, redundancy for scandals.
Yes.
Gotta have a few extra plays for that,
dude. You never know what the season might throw at you. But Spark doesn't have the problem that the Fuel had with XCI, right? Or doesn't have the problems that Florida had with not having a backup tank. If you have a backup tank, you're never running into these problems. Suddenly you have a DPS player on tank, right? Like that's the good part about redundancies. And of course, I mean, enjoyers of the Chinese Overwatch scene will be able to attest to the qualities that Coldest has. I'm not sure if he has it still or can still demonstrate it to the point where he's equal to MCD, but overall, like, I mean, this hurts the Spark. At the same time, like, there's no tolerance, like, for stuff like that, especially if it's repeated.
100%. Big agree.
I think the sentiment here is basically like that. It's a shame because he was one of the better players, and Spark will be losing a talent here. But obviously, there's no justification for the behavior. But there's one other interesting thing about this, and I've only just sort of thought about it now. And this wasn't meant to be a long topic, and it still won't be. But it has brought up one other thing in my mind that I was just reminding me of. And specifically because this is kind of the kind of discriminatory behavior towards Chinese players and by extension a little bit of the Chinese fan base as well. But this is actually not the first time. I mean, obviously we still have the SBB situation, the SABLB situation still exists. And SABLB is technically still on Seoul. This is not a commentary, and it's just an interesting comparison where you could argue that SABLB's actions, in terms of what he said publicly, were more damaging and more offensive towards the Chinese fan base. But he kind of do be still there. Not saying that he shouldn't be there or anything. It's just, again, it's an observation, not a statement. Yeah, it's quite interesting. I would argue that what SABLB did was probably worse, but
there's another interesting thing. Like, I didn't know this. Maybe you know more about this, AVRL. But apparently, Prophet is also on the shit list in China. Like, he had some remarks about like air quality in South Korea due to China or whatever, and he has been cancelled for that reason, I think.
Oh, I mean, a lot of Koreans have said that. Oh, dude, I've met Koreans. I'm not implicating an entire like country people or anything, but like that's a fairly normal sentiment. I'm not. This is why I have to tread carefully. You know, it feels like I'm kind of stepping on eggshells because depending on which parties listen to this, they either okay with it or offended by these comments. But it's basically what I'm trying to get towards is like the general sentiment from a lot of Korean people I've met is that like that's just like a normal thing. It's pretty normal that people agree that, oh yeah, there's a lot of pollution that's been carried over. It's in their news, for fuck's sake. I mean, on Korean news, it's like, oh yeah, here's the Chinese pollution being coming over, and they do the little meteorology reports, and it just has this this meteorology report of the stuff coming over from. So it's a fairly common thing. Right. I'm not saying like I don't know when and where Prophet decided to air that out into the world. Certainly, if you're I'm gonna assume he didn't walk into Beijing's town square and just get a megaphone and just yell it out there. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously, people are probably going to be, the Chinese fans are probably not going to be too, anything that comes off as like anti-China, they're probably not going to be too happy about.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, an unfortunate situation. Whenever that happens, I think there's also something to be said, like, I mean, about cultural rubbing points that don't necessarily need to be any that really as they pertain to the player characters. I mean, if that, for instance, like if what you said is true, and that's just in Korean Mania, how much can you blame Prophet for just picking up on that? Like, he's not doing a media degree or like doing the research on this. He's just like regurgitating whatever he picked up, right?
It's not like a specific Prophet thing. Like, here's Prophet's opinion. I'm like,
Mm.
bro, like most of his country think that, so it's like it's a
Yeah.
fairly normal thing.
Yeah. 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 Oh well, it is how it is.
So yeah, but I have noticed some friendly rivalry, let's say, between the Chinese players and Seoul in general. It's mostly Seoul. Let's be clear. As we saw some more wholesome stuff on the internet recently, where Lip and Leave exchanged some nice messages. So it's
Okay.
not like there's some beef going on between Korean and Chinese players. It's for the most part it's probably just between very specific players.
Yeah.
Like MCD's probably on the shit list, and he there's some negativity there. Like I said, maybe Prophet. I've definitely seen in terms of player comms that like I think Prophet teabagged somebody on Chengdu during a match, and somebody's like, "Oh shit, Prophet just teabagged me," and they really wanted to. I don't know. There's just like that was just like thing that I heard in a comms check,
Right.
not the official Overwatch League comms check. Just like this is the kind of stuff you would find only if you like dig deep into like Billy content, which most people won't do. There's some to put it nicely, like friendly band for some friendly rivalry between Chinese teams and Seoul.
Mm-hmm.
And to put it not so nicely, well, I'm just not going to go there, so it doesn't really need to be said.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep.
Cool. So there it is. There it is. But that's the thing, guys. The thing about talking about these types of topics is that like, and we have to debate whether we want to talk about stuff like this, but it's like a hot enough topic, and what it always comes down to is just like, yeah, MCD did some bad stuff. Everyone agrees it's bad, and everyone agrees that he should be punished. And there's nothing else really about it. So it's just the three of us sitting here nodding and agreeing with each other for 5 minutes as we're like, yes, this happened, and yes, we all agreed. Done. Moving on.
We also have no cultural context to whatever happened or the full context, right? Like, there's only so much you can responsibly do, which is, I feel like we got right to the edge of that.
And also for people wondering, I think the main thing people are probably interested in is like, well, TCP, what happens to Spark now? What do they do without MCD? And the answer to that question is quite simply, they keep playing Coldus and Mika, and that's all they need to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't think they'll be negatively effective. It seems like they were pretty content with playing Coldus Mika anyway towards the end of the season.
Yep.
And it didn't, for better or worse, didn't change the results of their season at all. Which is unfortunate.
Narrowly, yeah.
Or at minimum, it didn't do anything. So look, I don't know if it made the team worse. It's hard to tell. They lost anyway. We'll see in the play-ins. We will see in the play-ins.
I will say my immediate like unfair emotional reaction was New York died for this. Like, now I would have even more liked New York.
Well, New York should have beaten Guangzhou Charge when they played them.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yep.
I mean, by competition, I'm just saying, like, I think it's more likely that NYXL would have given us better games during play-ins than Spark will.
Correct.
I think NYXL became the better team towards the end of the year as Hangzhou Spark started to fall off. That being said, though, Spark are about to come into a very favorable hero meta for them, and namely because it unlocks Ashe for Shy again and Echo for Shy again and all that kind of good stuff.
Right.
No more Sombra.
Let's get into the real main course here of main course number one of two main courses. We got a very tiny appetizer just to whet your appetite, and then we got maybe a small dessert at the end. But really, it's about these two main topics that we're talking about today: a recap of the Countdown Cup into our official MVP ballot votes, and we'll obviously do the MVP stuff afterwards because some of the Countdown Cup results may impact, or at least the Countdown Cup results that gives good context to some of the voting that we did. So Countdown Cup came over. I think one of the better tournaments that we've had. Interestingly enough, without Dallas and Shanghai, the entire floor seemed very open. And I walked into this. My opinion was that any of the 4 teams could win. Now, obviously, Seoul ended up getting crushed, so that didn't that part didn't pan out. In Atlanta, they still had Pelican on high ping recovering from surgery. So, while Atlanta beat up on Seoul, they didn't really show up. So, kind of ended up still just being a Glads versus Chengdu affair, which in tournaments past you could just replace those 2 teams with Dallas or Shanghai. It's the same thing, right? But it was still a great tournament and one of the best finals we've had for sure as well.
Yeah, it regarding the finals, I was pretty convinced about halfway through that it was going one direction, and pleasantly surprised. It was one of those matches where you could easily see somebody going to bed and being like, "Oh, well, Chengdu's down. They're probably not going to come back." And then you wake up to it actually went the distance and came down to a specific play that won them the match. Like it was quite the nail biter and finished with some incredible style. So yeah, I would definitely agree. Didn't start that way, but it 100% ended as one of the best finals we've had in a while.
Yeah. No, I think overall, honestly, you want to hear my real take on this? I'm not sure that any of these teams are so far away from Shanghai and Dallas at the moment. I don't trust that full on like sandbag narrative. And if they did, so I assume they all scrimmed less, yes. I'm not sure if like putting pedal to the metal now will immediately give them the edge that they seem to have in the first part of the season. I think it's very possible that we've seen some of those teams that like will make it to the final during the actual playoffs.
Certainly possible.
Yeah. And
I think I don't know about Shanghai. Dallas I could definitely see. I think there are some arguments for Shanghai if they can return back to their form, but if I'm going to be honest, I don't know if you can stop like full tilt Shanghai. Like if you get them at their best, like that's a tough team.
I mean, Dallas enter a good meta. I think Counter Cup was always going to be a rough meta for Dallas.
Yeah.
Whereas this upcoming open meta is going to be far better. So there's always that.
Totally.
Just by the way, as well, Yiska, you mentioned if you want to hear my was it your real opinion or your real take? And my early response to that would be like, have we not been hearing that? Have you been doing fake takes?
You've been holding back.
Time? Have you been like, have you been lying to
Pulling
us?
punches?
Like, what do you mean? I've always just assumed you've always been giving your real take, and if you haven't, I feel like that's been quite dishonest. I'm taken aback.
Nah, like there's an internal consensus of 27 voices I've in my head, and sometimes like some of them are very real, but over half of them say that's a very dumb thing to say publicly, and then I just don't. That's just.
Well, you said you had like 27 different voices. My first instinct was like, that movie Split. I'm like, oh, that's just a movie about Yiska.
Yeah, he's
like 27 personalities in his brain. Like, oh my god, which version we got now? Apparently the one that gives honest takes. So the other 26 is all just dishonest takes. Apparently,
just politicians. Yeah, pretty much.
I'm glad we got the honest one out today. Don't hold back. Don't hold back today, as I'm sure you won't when we get into some of the MVP discussions. Let's go through this maybe in chronological order a little bit, because we talked about the grand finals happened, but let's rewind back just slightly. Maybe even rewind just pre-tournament where expectations were. So obviously we all had our own brackets that we talked about last week. Joe and I had Chengdu winning. Is that correct? Is that where you had yours, Joe?
I believe so. Yeah.
What did you have, Yiska? Who did you have winning?
I think
I had Chengdu winning. Yeah.
Well, so we all had Chengdu winning, but we had different people in the finals. Because I did have Glide's Chengdu finals. Did you guys have Glide's Chengdu finals?
No. I was. I fence sat a little bit regarding the strength of Gladiators in their first match against Chengdu, but ultimately went with Atlanta.
And then what did Yiska go with?
I went Atlanta Chengdu finals, and
so you both went Atlanta Chengdu finals. All right, well I'm gonna take a dub there.
Yeah,
fellas.
that's the closest.
I'm gonna take a dub there real quick.
You gambled
just for the one.
You gambled at one. What? Yeah. Didn't you? Hey? When you like saying, that's my hot take. Like, I don't know, Glads look good, but like this is, I'm just going doing it, and yeah, it paid off. Nice.
I've had a few of those where I'm like, my gut feeling is that it should be this, and this time I'm a little bit more trusting. We always remember that, I think with Summer Showdown, my gut feeling was that Chengdu were going to get top 2, but I just couldn't lock it in, and now I'm just like, lock it in.
Got it.
I also had the 4-1 finish. Now, obviously, I had 4-1 in Chengdu's favor, and I'll be honest with you, when Gladiators were 3-1 up, I'm like, bro, I'm about to get my 4-1, just the wrong team.
Yep.
So I think we all had Atlanta Reign beating Seoul, correct? Not even Yiska had Seoul beating Atlanta,
no.
I'm pretty sure.
No.
And we all had Chengdu beating Glads, or did anyone have Glads beating Chengdu?
No.
So
No, Glads all Chengdu beating Glads, yeah.
So is anyone else? I guess I'm somewhat surprised by how like immediately hot Gladiators came into that matchup, because I thought it would be more favored for Chengdu. And there's a couple of things in there. I mean, we can talk about the fact that Anubis didn't go well for them because they failed to cap, and some of that you can blame on 2CP, but then Gladiators had a really comfortable attack in comparison. I think team compositions had a play in there. I don't think it's as easy as like, well, Glad's captain Chengdu didn't.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of like Twitter, Reddit narrative is like, oh, they, clearly that's just that's all there is to it. But no, I think the subtlety in some of the compositional choices make or break how well you can stagger and stall out that defense. Notably, Glads had Muse on Winston, and he had a primal. And when they gave up 2 ticks and came back on a primal, it was a lot easier for them to then recontest. Whereas Chengdu were playing Gaga Ball, and there's just not that same staying power on the defense. That's one of the reasons. And then there was I was almost surprised that Chengdu full held Route 66, because it looked like after Kings Row they were starting to be out, because Kevster had a phenomenal game on Kings Row as well. His Tracer came up big time. Late Young was like trying to pressure him down, but Kevster could not be denied on Kings Row, it seemed. And then we have the fateful Oasis, which I'm sure will always be remembered as Leave and Jimmu both kind of just failing on the Sombra.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head in regards to like team compositions, and one of the big reasons why and even wrote about this on GG Recon, kind of one of the big selling points for me for Gladiators, if they were going to succeed, was going to be that the fact like that they could run double flex support and they could do it well. That puts you so far ahead in the Orisa mirror. On top of that, like the fact that Chengdu has to or has kind of leaned on Jinmu's Pharah throughout this tournament leaves their backline just completely open. So if you actually go back and watch those VODs, Kevster is just flanking perpetually, as he should.
On a Zen.
Yeah,
Monk should have been on the Ana. He was on the wrong hero.
Even when you get to the final and he is on Ana, Kevster is just constantly harassing and poking and baiting out cooldowns. Like it was definitely probably their best look regarding Chengdu's Pharah and kind of having to lean on Vatel's Mercy, but yeah, it was just kind of unfortunate. I think Glad's had a lot of people's numbers. I don't think anybody looked particularly comfortable or capable rather to play the double flex support and kind of I feel like it changes up the tempo of that matchup so weirdly that your Orisa just gets ultra nuke the second that shield goes down and you just have Discord on you.
The main thing, I think the double flick support was way more relevant in the Rain game. I didn't think double flick support was at all really relevant versus Chengdu, because Chengdu they didn't play as much. They played a good amount of Orisa, but they shared a lot of time with Ball. And
I think
you can't run double flick support at all versus a Ball dive, otherwise you're gonna get shredded.
They definitely. I do remember on Kings Row they 100. Now that I look or kind of think back, I think they did on some points, especially like going into like King's Third. I think they swap. I think they really want the space. I think they do it on defense as well, if memory serves. But most of the time, what was interesting was the Discord placement for Gladiators was significantly different than it was for Chengdu. Even when they're running similar compositions, like on Ilios, if you look at like the Discord usage, Gladiators was much more like DPS focused, trying to like zone out leave and give Kevster like more of a way in, if that makes sense. Whereas Chengdu was very much about tank busting and trying to get the front line back and kind of working trickle down, if that makes sense. But even then, yeah, I think Glad's had the right looks. If you gave them the space, they had ways to throw you something that Chengdu really didn't feel comfortable kind of rightfully mirroring. And not even just mirroring, but even matching in terms of just like running the dive felt really uncomfortable for them. You obviously mentioned it, AVRL, with like the kind of poor Sombra performance. Yeah, I'd say I wasn't super happy upon review with Jinmu's Sombra. Most it was pretty average. Too many times getting picked out. Too many times getting
Yeah.
pretty low value EMPs. It's
So,
yeah.
I mean, I thought his fire was average on Kings Row as well. As soon as you
Yeah.
go to Kings Row C for Chengdu, I think it's done. Yiska, were you surprised by this result as well? Because we all went for Chengdu winning here, but Glad's obviously, they came in and won.
For sure.
Close game.
I mean, both of their games were pretty close, and I think, like, if things go a little bit differently, those could have gone into Chengdu's favor. It's, like, we shouldn't forget that, I guess. But
for sure.
Yeah, no, I was surprised how good Glad's actually looked, for sure. It's that is one of those things where, like, I didn't know how they would fit into each other in the matchup, right? In the in whatever they ran against each other, because you can only run those mind tests or what's the name I'm looking at? Yeah, those matchups in emulation, right? But you got to see it in order to really understand why it happened, what happened. So I don't know, like, overall, like, I was laughing, for instance, when someone said, like, if you think that Leaf will get any dice against Kevster and Skewed in the backline, like, you're in for something else. Now, for large parts of both series, especially early on into both matches, if I remember correctly, Leaf was actually pounding, but then they seemed to be able to figure that out, and also maybe there was some inconsistency in Leaf's play, which is very rare. I think that probably was the difference. Yeah,
I'm gonna step up. And that's map dependent. You have to understand how good Tracer is on a control map versus like Kings Row. It's like night and day.
Yeah.
There's a map difference there, but yeah, continue.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I think overall, like, it's also it's actually really good that this happened in the way it did for what it means for play-ins and playoffs. Sorry, because if you have two teams that get to every single final or go very deep, if you have only two tournament winners, then it's very easy to think, okay, one of those two teams is going to win or whatever, right? Like, whatever, play-ins doesn't mean much, playoffs doesn't mean much. I was watching these matches thinking, once again, as I elaborated before, I don't know if it's that clear against the top dog teams of the season either. So, I think, once again, like, I guess eventually, but when we talk about the final, we can talk about Shu, but do you guys have this feeling where you're like, it should be totally fine to talk about how good Shu was this weekend without automatically, like, making him your MVP?
Yeah,
and
of course.
Contributing towards the fact that people will argue for that? And
it is so weird that you have to clarify that, because I would like to believe we live in a world where that's the normal thing. The normal thing to do is to talk about Shu and how well he played without the context of the MVP or him being MVP. That's what normal people would do. But I feel like, I think you looked at enough socials where people got people got enough recency bias in their brains that you have to even bring that up now. So yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
But yes, the answer to your question is yes.
Yeah. No, but he's a difference maker for sure. And I don't know, like, I was barely lucid during the first series. I gotta confess. The second one is, of course, more present in my mind. But yeah, like, overall, after the thing is, the one thing I will say is, the first match didn't inform me how the final would go. Like, you sometimes have 3-2s where you're like, oh yeah, that team was clearly better, and like, they kind of threw, and if they can just, like, not throw, then it will be 4-0 or whatever, right? That wasn't that match.
I was very much the opposite. Coming into this, I kind of had Glads pegged as like the best potentially. But if they could reach that potential was a big question mark. Again, this is the Gladiators, for God's sakes,
Right.
the team that like doesn't get to Hawaii. And I didn't know if this was going to motivate them or if this was going to set them back, just for the mental's sake. But yeah, I think that narrative's definitely put to bed. You can take that out with Old Yeller and just take it out behind the barn. Like, these kids show up, they beat the Shock when the Shock looked great. They beat Chengdu, and Chengdu's like God's forsaken meta. Like, this is Glads are the real deal coming into playoffs. They're not a team to mess around with.
People keep saying this is like the perfect Chengdu meta when you forget the fact that Leave's best hero is the Echo, which is banned.
Yeah.
And that's what I have to keep reminding people of. Like, no. It's not Chengdu's best meta when Echo is the number one pick for Leave that he wasn't allowed to play here.
It's not just
that,
the number one pick for him, right? He's also just way better than everyone else, but maybe profit.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is another point we can talk about when we talk about Seoul. How much?
Well, we're going to get to Seoul. We're just about to get there. I'm going to wrap up the bow tie on Gladiators, the first half of the tournament for Gladiators, until we then reopen that for Christmas when we get to the grand finals again. But for me, I think it just ends that I was very optimistic about Gladiators, which is why I had them in my grand final. Again, my Preds literally had Glads in the grand finals because I knew their potential was high. The reason why I didn't think they would beat Chengdu is because I did not believe that Gladiators were going to be clutch enough as a team to win those map 5s, to win those map 7s, which, right now looks like, well, they won them, and what a stupid thing to say. But you have to remember the fact that every other time, Glads get to those late games versus especially teams like Atlanta, but versus most teams, they buckle and they choke mega hard. They choke really hard in those like important map 5s, and they win them. They look awful. And that to me has been the Glad's reputation for most of this year. So for me to have a different opinion about Gladiators and their ability to start winning those, it takes a lot of convincing. And yeah, let's be clear about something. I am convinced now because they've done it in a map 5 and a map 7. So well done. Versus the team that I thought was going to win the entire tournament.
Yeah.
But it took a while for me to get to a place where I thought Glads was going to be that team.
I will say, like, one quote from the podcast you had with Hunter was stuck by my mind, because in my mind I was like, okay, so what changed actually about the Gladiators that they are now able to actually clutch this? Because they're still doing this is like, I don't know what they're doing this. Like, you could argue maybe it was effective. Like, you don't, like, if you have a quality roster like this, why are you running the double flex supports type of cutesy shit? Like, you just play whatever, like, you just play whatever, right? Like, whatever you're best at, and if you have the quality, you just win. And Gladiators across their history, I feel like Season 1 taught them almost like a bad message, because when they ran that Bastion shit and had like a bunch of success with that, like that must have been like in the formative years of DePay as a coach. Cutesy shit means good, and wins games in important situations. Therefore, we do that every time. And then like the Great Bamboozle just nailed that coffin shut. And ever since then, like, there's so much like curveball stuff in their important series where it, like, more often than not, I feel in recent years it has just thrown the match balance off. Now, here's the difference why it worked this time and didn't work before. The Unter quote was, one or two players can, at this level, can absolutely like make you lose in Overwatch, right? Glads doesn't have one or two bad players anymore in their roster when they're playing can play brick comps. They just don't. Right? Like, there is no ability.
Problem.
No, like, I mean, they are very clearly better on break comps, and that doesn't necessarily speak to the quality of Moth as a main support, but probably more towards Glads as a team as it plays into Brigade. So, like, everything else is just like either clearly above average to good to great to top tier, right? Everything else on this team, right? Even Space, honestly, has surprised me this year, how he played. So I think that's just the difference. Like, you do not have a weakness on this clear weakness on this team. Like, sorry, last year the backline was.
It's not a clear weakness for me, but I definitely can name you a few heroes, a few lineups that they could run that definitely will trip them up, I think, coming into playoffs. Now that's a big, crack out the yoga mat. That's it. That is a reach. But to say this is, just to curb expectations, I do have some gripes with the roster overall. But mostly agree, and credit to Space. I thought that,
Yes.
moving forward, I thought that he had such a spatially aware game throughout the entirety of that. Their recontest, I think it was against Chengdu, where he bombs and they recontest 3 or 4 down. The amount of ultimates that he's just flicking and eating, he was on, even leading into this. I think one of the big reasons why they're even here is thanks to Space. I think he's having a bang up year.
He's the most underrated player on the team because people don't bring up Space enough. Everyone's like, "Oh, Kip's Trace is so good," and Bertrand carried on the Hanzo, and well, actually, I don't know how much people talk about Muse, and then he's Shu MVP and skewed best sprig, and then you just kind of forget about Space. But no, I've remembered Space the entire time. I've had Space. To me, even when they were losing, was still was a very good player. The only thing is I don't know if I trust Space as much on the other heroes. I think his Diva is currently top tier.
Yeah,
totally.
And Glad's kind of need to run as much Diva as possible, which thankfully for them, Diva is so integral to all metas and all compositions that you can just one trick a Diva right now. So that's fine. Let's get into, if we're all clear on the early Chengdu Glads, because don't worry guys, there's more Chengdu Glads to be had in terms of conversation. So we'll get back in there. But Seoul ended up dropping at Atlanta, which we all believe would happen. Chengdu drop to Glads here, and there's 2 variations here because I think we all believe that Glads would drop, and I'm now of the belief, and was of the belief previously as well, that even if Glads dropped early, they would still beat the Seoul Dynasty. So I think we should pretty much all be in agreement that Seoul we're gonna lose early on, except Yiska, who I believe had Seoul winning in that lower bracket game.
I don't remember. It might be a case, yeah.
So now you have to justify a pick that you don't even remember doing.
Yeah, no, that's
this phantom pick that
to be
I've
fair,
lovely.
it would have been against a different team, right?
Yeah.
That would have been.
Well, you would have had Seoul versus Glads, and you would have had
Gladiators.
Seoul beating Glads.
Yeah, I mean it's a complete underestimation of Gladiators this weekend. Yeah, and also
overestimating Seoul.
Yeah, I mean, of course, and I will also say, overall, possibly also influenced by the Atlanta situation, which I guess we will talk about it, but I thought was pretty significant for them.
It's a surprising result, but
yeah, I mean the fact that Seoul meets, I think I had Atlanta winning as well. So then, even if you think that,
can we pull up our Preds from last week? Is there a way we can show that right now?
Yep. Eric, can you
continue while you?
Yeah.
Yeah. 1 second.
So Glads, I said, will beat Dynasty. Dynasty goes down. Hunters would beat Gladiators. The fact that Chengdu, the team that I thought was going to win the final, then met Seoul. I mean, I would have 10 out of 10 times told you that Chengdu is going to beat Seoul. So that wasn't as interesting as much as Gladiators winning the first one, and that breaking my bracket.
So, talking about Seoul, dude. So, I mean, are you disappointed in Seoul's performance, or is it what we expected? I'm gonna be real. This is what I expected. So my expectation was Seoul were not high, but yours were obviously a little bit higher, Yiska. So, are you now? Where's your opinion of Seoul sitting at after this?
I'm not sure if they were necessarily higher. I think I just had lower expectations for Gladiators, right? Is what it means. Because, in my mind, Gladiators is not going to shove Chengdu down, right? And therefore, Seoul has a chance in the lower bracket against Gladiators, which, in hindsight, of course, doesn't make sense, even though I would have liked to see that. But yeah, I mean, Not really an underperformance by Seoul. I think this weekend it's pretty much
Just a normal performance.
yeah. I think
Which
it's
is, by the way,
a little disappointing that they only could like push Atlanta so far with a heavily handicapped Atlanta. But yeah,
because it goes to show that Chengdu and Glad's both 3-0'd Atlanta, and Seoul, you know, kind of got handed by Atlanta. Well, to be fair, once you look at the scorelines, it's a bit closer than that. 3-2 Hanamura, 5-4 Nambani. It's a little bit closer than what I'm selling. But really, what I'm saying here is, and it's funny because I had people coming into my stream that were like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you're so low on Seoul. Like, no faith in Seoul." And my response to that is like, "Wait, you still have faith in Seoul? Like, what's wrong
Yeah.
with you? How do you still have faith in Seoul? How many times do you need to be baited in and disappointed for you to learn your lesson?" That's my message to anybody. I can't believe there were people coming at me like, "Oh man, you can't believe so low on Seoul." I'm like, you've been like sleeping under a rock this nice season. Have you not watched Seoul games? How have you not low on Seoul as everyone else is currently? Like I think after this result, now if you weren't before, you're like, okay, well now I get it. Now I can see why, you don't really bet on Seoul currently.
yeah,
Unless it's versus the Fusion, apparently. So that's just a different can of worms. And
Mm.
now Seoul, okay, they're in playoffs, so this game had high implications because
Yes.
the winner of Chengdu Seoul literally goes straight to playoffs,
Yeah.
and the loser go to play-ins.
Yeah.
So Chengdu are going to Texas now, and Seoul go to play-ins where they have to face up against, I believe, the winner of Fusion Hangzhou.
Yep.
And there's
Yeah.
no guarantee that Seoul beat the winner of that. Seoul could lose that. So it's hard to tell now. It's like Seoul's fate is in a really interesting place, Volamel.
Yeah, they're I think for playoffs in particular, not to get too ahead, that may kind of play into their favor. Knowing them to be a very like one-dimensional. I think one trick is definitely not fair to say, especially with their recent performance, but very one-dimensional. They come prepared and they can execute on that one prepared strategy, but outside of that, much to Fissure's chagrin, yeah, they tend to flop, and I think that's what we kind of saw. Chagrin.
Are you making up words at the moment, or
No, that's a real word.
that's a real word? Okay.
Yeah, you can look it up.
The more you know.
Look at him just grabbing his Oxford English dictionary mid ovation.
Hey, there's only a few words.
Look at Joe's face chagrining right now. Look at that. Anyway, that's not what the word means. Anyway, if you don't have any other thoughts on Seoul, we're going to talk about Atlanta now as we start moving towards the finals.
The one thing I'll say on Seoul, just to give credit where credit's due, I definitely pegged them worst. They were the worst, very clearly the worst. I thought Creative had a stellar game.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. I'll give that to you. I think Prophet still showed up versus even Leave. There was a few moments. I think Blizzard World was one of them where Prophet still had some really cool stuff going on. He had some great performances there. So playoffs Prophet we're gearing up. He's revving the engine. He's slowly shifting into battle mode.
I mean, that's
as
another thing.
Play-ins.
That's another thing that's possibly underestimated. As I said, like where I wanted to talk about it on Seoul. Dude, like this guy has really significantly improved his echo. Like, you know how awful he looked last Prophet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Like, you know how awful he looked last year on that hero, where people were like, the goat, like really obnoxiously wrecking him for that. Which fair. Like it was just not good. There was some stuff. I have like one particular game on Hollywood in mind that was just complete clown shoes, right? He has very clearly grinded that in the off season to a point where, I mean, I think Leaf and him are just a class of its own on Echo specifically. So, like coming into season playoffs, once again, don't want to spoil the next episodes, but like I think this is a very different Seoul than what we're currently seeing. Even though Prophet once again shows up on Trace as well.
Yeah, team might be just a little bit too heavy to carry here. Fitz had some good moments, but especially in the Atlanta game, but not enough to carry the team through. So just too few and far between for Seoul, unfortunately, even for the good players. So now that we move on to properly Atlanta, and maybe if you want to continue the Seoul discussion, we can start with Seoul Atlanta. But really, I think that's a pretty said piece for Atlanta. It was about seeing them play Pelican on day one with, I believe it was 160, 170 ping.
Mm.
And then on day two, they couldn't play Pelican again because he was on 200 ping. So
Yeah.
that was only in the Glads game, and then versus the Chengdu game, Pelican came in again. So Atlanta versus Glads, no Pelican, Edison only, was definitely a weaker look for Atlanta. That's putting it lightly.
Mm.
And then versus Chengdu, you can still see that it just wasn't. This just is not the same Pelican. Hyping Pelican is just not the same. But I'm not just looking at only Pelican saying, oh, it's it's because Pelican was on high ping, or that's the one reason.
Mm.
But it was it's one of many reasons. It's probably the forefront reason. It's probably the first reason you think of, and then beyond that as well, there was some good performances by Kai on McCree and Hanzo, as you would expect them to. Pretty standard stuff there. I'm trying to remember if there were any specifics from Atlanta that I felt like cost them this tournament or this series or any of the series. And I don't want to just have it generically be like, oh yeah, they got team diff because Chengdu are a much better team. But honestly, Chengdu were also just a much better team.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a couple picks that I definitely weren't super high on. I think they made sense in certain matchups, but it seemed like there was a bit too much Torb for my liking. Personally, it didn't feel like it was really finding a ton of value. If I'm going to be completely honest,
Hey Joe, the turret doesn't get affected by ping. It's genius.
It's true. That is true. You do auto aim. I've seen that argument throw around quite a lot. Crossfires are very nice, but I think there's some better picks. I do appreciate the fact that Atlanta Rain continues to run Reinhardt, and I think it is kind of interesting given the map. But I think that kind of locked them into certain areas. I think it was versus Glads. I could be remembering wrong.
They also
tried to
played it versus Hunters. They also played the Ryan versus Hunters. Yeah.
I just have
And
their
Jimmu
Hanamura.
laughed. Jimmu thought that was hilarious. He's like, okay, that's a free win.
I think it might have been against. I for the life of me I can't remember. I know it's just on Hanamura A, and they're trying to attack into it, and they keep trying to like TP in, and it just isn't going anywhere. Like,
oh yeah,
you know what I mean? Like
that.
it was just a little bit too much. I did like their aggression versus Seoul. I thought that was fantastic. Really picking Profit out was good, especially on control. I think it was Busan. But yeah, thought I'd see a little bit more Kai, a little bit more flexibility. Yes, it sucks that Pelican was as handicapped as he was. Also very interested in the speed at which they played the Pharah. I thought that could have been ping related, but I'm not entirely too sure. Yeah, overall, just as another shitty situation that they're kind of thrown into, and I feel for them.
Does anyone have, maybe I want to know if it's just me or if anyone else agrees with this, but did anyone have this kind of Iris versus Shu thing going on? Because to me, I did. And the reason for that is because both players have been very well known for their BAPs this year, to the point where they're like, they could be the number 1 and number 2 BAPs in the entire league, right? It could be.
Yeah.
And so I was very specifically paying attention to like, well, now we get to know who's the better Baptiste player. Is it Iris or is it Shu?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think look, you say it well. Like both extremely good at Baptiste. I mean, I think it gets more towards maybe Roll Stars discussion where I'm headed, but yeah, I think that's not a terrible narrative. Mine
Well,
was
just compare the teams. I mean, they literally played against each other. So,
100%.
does anyone have any opinions on the Iris Shu thing in the literal matchup? Or
I have more. I mean, I was more interested in how little it seemed like Brig was doing in a lot of these games. But that's just me.
Because my opinion on this, I thought Iris was quiet. I thought Iris and Master were quiet.
Yeah.
In both their series, like I think we normally see a lot more carry potential out of Iris. Like all the good moments that Shu had this tournament, like, oh my god, Shu, look at this clutch window, look at this clutch play. That's what I expected Iris to also be doing, because I remember Atlanta having that capability. I remember Iris also being that type of player that, is able to bail Atlanta out of situation with just fantastic play. But I feel like that was just kind of missing.
Let's be very clear though. like even statistically, there just isn't anyone that plays Bab like Shu does. Like this flanky type of thing, taking duels, getting like picks from the sidelines, using window only on yourself and getting heavy value with that. Like nobody plays it like.
So a really
Shu does.
successful Khan is what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Like double as successful at that particular part of BAP than anyone else. Because if you look at like solo kill statistics, like there's not a 20% difference. It's like he has twice as much as the second guy. It almost looks like a statistical error in the way. Like it's like 0.5 kills per 10, solo kills per 10. The next guy has like 0.22 or something. Like it's completely like that stat in itself has a lot of room for exploration in terms of like what does that mean? Is he just more on angle on flanks? Is he not calling out like the kill targets he gets? Is he rarely coordinating? Like there's a lot of reasons why that might be happening, but like it is just completely different from everyone else in the league.
I think they play around him quite a lot. I think the positioning for even for the Gladiator support line outside of even just Baptiste, they do have a tendency to choke up their support line quite heavily, especially on certain plays. Not only that, but he gets a lot of attention from space, especially when you look at like Chengdu King's row, I think third. Lots of dive attempts go on to him. He lamps himself. Space is always looking at him. He has skewed right next to him. Like you're not gonna kill him. And even when they do end up running the double flex, like it's not a non-factor when you throw a Discord on a Mercy and you have the Baptiste kind of rattling it down. Like there is a lot of value in trying to like mitigate that through how aggressive Shu can be. Like he does get some resources, but he also performs extremely well with them, to be fair.
I'm glad you brought up the double flex because that was going to be my next and maybe final point about Atlanta here is that I think Gladiators exposed a major weakness in Atlanta Reign as far as this matchup goes. For the most anyone that's supporting Atlanta and is wondering if they should be worried about this, my answer is no. That we're going to playoffs meta. It's probably not going to be as relevant. But specifically because Orisa had so much playtime in the Countdown Cup, like way more playtime than I thought. I still remember like many episodes ago when we're like, we were kind of theorizing what possible comps, and we were like, yeah, it's probably just going to be like 90% ball and maybe like a tiny bit of Orisa for teams that want to force it. And then Orisa ended up being like 50% of the game time, even from teams like Chengdu, right? So the point I'm trying to get to is there's a lot of Orisa mirrors that ended up happening. And I don't know if anyone remembers, but we have had double shield metas, we have had Orisa metas, and some of the backlines you saw during those Orisa metas were double support, double flex support, BAP Zen specifically, and Gladiators, because Skewed's a very unique player who has a Zen. Who actually he's a flex support player who has the typical Zen Ana, plus then a break. And there's very few flex support players that then also have like a very good brig. And I was going to say serviceable, but that just doesn't sell it. Skew doesn't have a serviceable brig. He might have the best brig. He might actually have the best brig, and then on top of that, he's also a flex support player. So that gives Gladiators in this very specific meta where you're seeing Orisa versus Orisa mirrors the capability to run double flex support when Rain can't. Because Master's not going to be your Zen player. If anything, a lot of main support players end up playing the BAP, but your best BAP player is obviously Iris. So they're kind of screwed. Like Atlanta cannot match this double flex support. So the way you normally count, because it's kind of like rock, paper, scissors, the way you normally counter double flex support is you go hard dive, tracer, ball, etc., and you just farm the supports because they have no ability to counter flanks and defend themselves. But Rain weren't in a position to do that because they're not going to be the ball team. Rain are typically not a ball team. They'll play it and they'll force it on certain controls, but otherwise they want to play Orisa. That's like Gator's best hero, one of his best heroes. So Rain kind of catch themselves into a hard place where they would love to play Orisa because that's Gator's hero, but they can't match the double flex support, which means they get gapped in the straight up mirror from a support difference because double flex support just has much higher output compared to like a BAP bring. It's just you get outclassed, and I feel like Rain got outclassed because of that compositional difference.
100%. And I think as we saw teams begin to qualify for Hawaii, you saw an interesting adaptation where, if approached with a double flex support, you'd see a lot of the teams that were still playing their main supports try to force some sort of mercy pocket for this Hanzo pick that I thought was interesting.
Yep.
And we didn't see that out of Atlanta for, XYZ reason.
You saw a little bit. You saw a little bit.
Sure, touches here and there. But I think majority of the time, if memory serves, Massa was on Brig, just kind of. God bless him. He tried his heart out, but there's really nothing to proc inspire. You're whip shotting on cooldown. You're having to pack everything. Like, there's really nothing for you to do. Yeah, it's I feel for the guy 100%. And I also like when I talk about like the difference in tempo and like how the game is played, not necessarily how teams are approaching engagements, but just like how the rhythm of the game is feeling. There's one clip of Gator on Kings Row. I think it's versus the Gladiators on point A, where he shields the initial corner or the hotel corner, has his shield pop, he backs up, doesn't really have any other cooldowns, and just has to like face tank a Discord orb and a volley straight to the face and just gets like blown up instantly. You saw it on I think it was Oasis on University, constantly getting discorded, constantly getting blown up. His once that first shield's gone, you don't have much else to work with. You don't have anything else, and it's not like you can answer back with your own Discord to match because you're playing Massa. It's a catch-22, and that was another, like I said, a big reason why I kind of pushed Gladiators a little bit. That double flex was a really, really astute look and something that they were very uniquely capable of doing.
Yeah, I think this Mercy adaptation is, first of all, it's the thing that teams do when they can't do double flex support.
Yep.
And even teams that, by the way, have 2 flex supports in the lineup, you can't just slot in your second flex support. This is not a situation when you're like, let's pretend Dallas and Shanghai here. You can't just do repel fielder. You can't just do Izayaki Molly. And for anybody wondering, like, why isn't the whole purpose? The reason is that specifically that double flex support lineup fails once it goes up against a dive. Like, that's a bad matchup for it. So there's a very clear rock, paper, scissors here. So if you play, let's say, for example, Izayaki Molly, you are trapped now on double flex support, and you don't want to be trapped, which is why skewed is so big for this team, because you're not trapped into playing that. If you go up against a dive, cool, skewed goes Brig now. And his Brig's the number 1, so fuck it, you're fine. You are more than fine. So you're set to go in any direction. That is such a unique and crazy good lineup situation in the back line for a composition that is just like, I mean, I got to hand it to Gladiators for nailing that pickup. I remember on my co-stream, I was like, dude, I think Deepe has like got 3 million IQ here. How has he done this? He's purchased Moth away from the shock in order to completely ruin the shock. Don't even then play Moth because he doesn't need to. And so he's just got a 2-for-1 where he's got an insane backline with Shu skewed, and he's ruined the shock at the same time. Like, what a clever person.
It's also like, you gotta recognize that, like, I mean, Moth is probably not inexpensive, and to then still just say, look, we're not playing like the contract volume here. We're playing whatever is best, but at the same time, like, that, to be able to get rid yourself of the bias of like wanting to play Moth and actually doing it to that degree where it's, I mean, skewed, like, this guy is just like, was entirely underappreciated by everyone else. Like, I don't think they had too much competition on him, right, in the preseason. And that guy just replaced basically the best main support of the last 2 years, if you want, right? So, to stick to your guns and just play whatever you believe, that is, I mean, in essence, brought them the championship now.
Yeah, Glads are a funny team, aren't they? Because they are equally a team that's willing to spend big time, like, for example, Decay in his debut season, but also a team that this season, with the skewed pickup, won probably, I have to imagine he's not that expensive because no one else was going for him. They won massively in value. Like, skewed must be one of the players that has the highest value, if you put it on an XY graph, right, in terms of value for price. This was what I'm going for. He must be one of the most valuable players in that regard. Kind of
Which-
like Arns' rookie year with Shock, right? Almost.
Yes, which to be fair is a little bit lucky in the sense that did we have a brick ban yet? I don't think we did, right?
Nope.
Yeah.
No.
So I mean, who
It was
knows?
Zen, then Lucio.
Yeah. So that boosts the value, right, of a player like that. And that brick is also very viable in the meta. Like but yeah, no, like overall, like once again, like sometimes your 50k, and I'm not saying I'm sure he's making more than minimum.
Oh,
But,
that's a leak? No, it's not. Not a leak.
But sometimes your least expensive player is just the guy that brings the most value. And if you just have, once again, we're talking about redundancy, you're just more flexible. And yes, you have to negotiate that against the adverse effects of having a bigger roster, maintaining that, keeping everyone happy. But at the same time, like, it's really hard to argue like that it hasn't created value for some of the teams in the competition and has also broken a bunch of teams. Like, can you imagine where Dallas would be with, like, how different the season might have gone if XCI was actually there, or if they had a capable hit scan to the
If
same
was
degree?
there,
Yeah.
is it a hot take to say they would have had a worse season? I almost think Dallas have gone where they are because of their circumstances. I actually think if they didn't kind of force the meta and like skew the meta the way they did, you know, part of me thinks Dallas would be far more cookie cutter as a team, and that would give them less results. Obviously, this is very hard
Possible,
theory crafting,
Yeah.
but that's just my take.
Yeah.
I want to zoom in on the Chengdu Hunters versus Los Angeles Gladiators final now, because we talked plenty about the other matches. Let's just go straight to the finals here. Obviously, the big thing to talk about is the difference between the finals and the way they matched up the first time. The one of the key differences for me was that Leave played a lot more Trace in the finals. I think one of the things going against Chengdu that I think they did poorly in that opening matchup versus Glads was that Leave forced way too much Sombra. It's not even just the Sombra, by the way. It's everything else that wasn't the Tracer. And because Leave wasn't playing a lot of Tracer, which is one of his best picks, you have Kevster doing whatever he wants. In order to challenge Kevster on the Tracer, I feel like you need your own Tracer, because otherwise he's out of control. And not only was Leave not playing Tracer, because Jinmu's then also playing the Pharah, Far Away or Monk are just, the flex support is just sitting there getting farmed, because he can't, there's no help. Only Late Young can peel, and Late Young can't just sit on this one dude for the whole game when he's got an entire team to work to help. So I think Leave playing the Tracer in the finals definitely helped out Chengdu a lot more. But that being said, Glads was still up 3-1.
Yeah. I mean, if there was anybody to make it look possible that Hanzo could kind of contain a Tracer player, it definitely is Leave. I'm still constantly reviewing. I don't even think this was in the final. I think this was in their first matchup, but how he cancels Birdring's EMP by just like shooting the guy in the head.
Oh my god, yeah, that was
Like,
beautiful.
Yeah.
You can't. This kid doesn't miss. He has to try to miss. Like, it's insane. Obviously, the Sombra is a different story altogether, but yeah, in general, I 100% agree. Best way that they probably could have marched forward was to kind of move him off of the Hanzo and probably onto the Tracer. And we did see that, especially as the series went on. If anything, I think that was probably the catalyst to have them kind of regain a little bit momentum. But then you start to really, like, I think we fairly accurately predicted, you know, if it's not the Pharah, then what is Jinmu necessarily playing? The Sombra also is kind of hit or miss.
Sombra Genji, that's it. Sombra
Yeah,
Genji.
that's really all they got. And then you still have the issue when you do play the Pharah, which looks reasonable enough. Obviously, was a tool that they pulled out quite a bit. Like you said, Monk just kind of is on an island. Ivatal has to be around with the team, you know, protecting Jinmu as he, you know, throws himself at the enemy team. One thing I will say that kind of foreshadows their playoff performance is that Chengdu is not a clean team. There's plenty of people, especially within our community, that are little stats gremlins that look at, you know, the Chengdu Hunters and look at some of their best heroes. And I think a lot of the discussion around it has been a surprise that some of the heroes that you would kind of point towards as some of their best aren't statistically as impressive as you would assume. Not all, just some. And I think that does come from the fact that it seems like they're not a clean team fight team. They always seem to be like one down, having the Mercy come in for that clutch res, and they play off of that kind of chaos really, really well. I don't know if that
clutching with a 3K, yeah, standard
Yeah.
Chengdu stuff.
it's I don't know how well that's gonna provide for them once we get into the playoffs. They could hide under the chaos of the meta. Maybe things get a little messy. Maps are very colorful in terms of what styles are being run. Maybe they can hide behind it. But
That'd be real. Not that I've ever not been real on the show. I have to clarify that after Yiska said what he said earlier. But I think there's a lot more chaotic moments in this game than there are like orderly
for
moments.
sure. Yeah.
So Chengdu can easily thrive in that because they can create a lot of chaos, especially with ball
Totally.
dive. So okay, you also had the situation, by the way, where Chengdu were kind of changing up a few members. We had Nisha coming in for Numbani, and then you had I think Among and Farway came in for Route 66. And so it seemed like Chengdu were just swapping pieces around. It's kind of classic Chengdu. First of all, we'll say this much: Yveltal and Nisha to me are almost like a 1-for-1. Almost doesn't even matter which one you play, and they're both pretty good. They play Nisha for one map, decide it wasn't good, and they put Yveltal back in. I was a little surprised by the Among Farway pick. I'm not too sure what that was about. There is like a fan theory, and to be fair, this fan theory has some legs on it, that they wanted to just give Monk and Gaga a little bit of space away, allow them to mentally reset, and maybe to observe the game from from the outside a little bit, the outside in, just have a look at how the game's going, what they can be doing. So, for example, Gaga just looking at what Among's doing and seeing how Glad's react to that improves his gameplay when he comes back in, which I think has some legs. So it's not that wild of a fan theory, but it does seem quite interesting that Chengdu were this willing to like flex their subs.
I actually have some info on that from a previous game where that also happened, where they brought in Among when they were down. And I assume it was the same here, is that Amon coming in is a mental shift. Like he just provides a certain mental reset to the team. I mean, you're 3-1 down. Like maybe you're like discouraged, or that the coaches realize the comps are breaking up or whatever it is. You just you can't sit there, just try the same thing and just take the loss, right? And I mean, you got to say it kind of worked in the end, right? Like the substitution sort of dampened the fall.
They did lose the map. They did lose the map. Amon came in on, but yeah, they did come back after that.
Let's also yes, Glad's won, but there were. If it wasn't for one moment, this game was won by Chengdu Hunters. I guess we can talk about that moment now, but if Shu does not do what he did there, so okay, let's set that up, right?
On Havana,
yes. Right? They have a minute left or something. Was it 2 minutes even or something like that?
It didn't change.
They definitely have time left, right? Yeah. Jinmu still had his blade. They are like 2 people up in the fight. That fight is over until it wasn't, right? Then Shu kills one. Like, Jinmu has to pull blade. That's already big. Like, that's where it should stop by all rights. And then you can't really say, okay, whatever happens after once Jinmu pulls the blade. If Jinmu has the blade and they go into third, I think, everything there is like a 75% chance that Chengdu wins the map. If Shu doesn't make that play. There is no business for Glads to win that fight. And it's not even that it's really about having made an incredible mistake. I guess you could request Jinmu to be more disruptive towards what Shu was doing and shutting him down more, and just I'm not sure what the cooldown situation on his part was like. But this I guess in first person it doesn't look super impressive mechanically, but all of that in decisions making and the impact that play had is EQO level, pulls the blade and decides the map, and ultimately decides the match. I think if he doesn't pull that, if he just gets one, Chengdu wipes it. Jinwoo never has to pull blade. They go into third. They just have to wipe it once. They have I think they even have 2 or 3 ults advantage. It felt like it was over. and then it wasn't. And like I think like discussing that match under like just how close it was, and also how devastated they felt. Like I don't know. And okay, that's also my soapbox moment. But like, why the fuck did it take so long for us to see the first person play? Like, no, that's inexcusable. I'm sorry. If you're broadcasting highlight moments or like the highest level of Overwatch, you want like you can miss that play. It's not like in the moment that it happens, right? You gotta have it ready, bro. Like you know what Shu does. As we have explained, like this guy gets on flanks and gets kills. That is something that should happen in your research.
The observers didn't swap the Shu fast enough.
Even if you don't, you should have like a backups observer that has the replay directly after. So like they even interrupted the play of the game that was also Shu getting that kill. All of that was a complete breakdown of like celebrating a great movement that unfortunately lessened the enjoyment of it. And I think the first time we got to see it was only on the Watchpoint post show, which I'm sorry is inexcusable if you want to highlight.
I'll be straight about something. They usually skip the play of the game.
That's right. I think it was just like a funny coincidence that like that looked like it was going to be the game of the play of the game. They end up cutting it short anyways.
Yeah, it's not like it's not. I don't. That wasn't a broadcast mistake. They normally skip that. That's
right.
Pretty standard.
The broadcast mistake is not to have. I'm not sure what broke down. Like usually, my understanding is like you have the main observer, it's not the producer.
Director.
Director. The director makes the calls where the camera should be on and whatnot, and who to go to. Like, you gotta have an observer. In that situation, you gotta have one on Shu. So you have a replay right after that moment is over. I'm sorry. Like, that needs to be
the way the replay ops works is there's a specific replay operator whose only job is to handle replays.
Right.
And they have to go back in time. I don't know if you've seen how the replays work in the Overwatch League. They have to not clip the replay, but they have to like replay. It's like if you go in the replay view of Overwatch League today and you just kind of rewind and you replay the moments. It's kind of similar to that. But it's also like, so for one, you have to like go back and find that, which, you know, even if you do it instantly, takes you a few seconds, 5 seconds.
Sure.
The other issue is you're deep enough in the game where there's about a minute left. There's actually less than a minute left after Shu makes that play. And it's a very important moment for the Hunters to reset up for their final push. That if you go for this replay, you at minimum you are going to be, you know, missing Chengdu Hunter's initial setup and what they're going to do, what Glads are going to do earlier as well, and setting up for what the final fight for the grand final is going to be, which I think is very important. Or at worst, you're just going to fucking miss the whole thing, aren't you? You're going to play this replay and it's okay, cool. You see the frags, very good, but if I'm casting this. And you ask me, would I rather see that replay straight away, or would I rather just look at what the fuck's going on next so I can set up the final fight of the grand finals on map number 7 and package that up and send it home? I say kill the replay. I don't want to see that. Don't give me the replay. I don't want it.
The thing is, like, there's so much downtime. Is there not between those two fights?
It wasn't. That's a risk you take as well. Is how much downtime do you think there really is? Because if you get that wrong, I'm sorry, but you've ruined the grand finals.
But
if you miss, it's a very high risk.
Even if you don't play it there, like you gotta show it after you showed the players celebrating and everything.
Time spot after the grand final. Probably don't wait till watch point is what you're saying, really, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I can agree with that.
Yeah.
Even leading into watch point, it's just like, I think you have to, when you have plays like that, I think you have to make an audible. That's exactly what the fans want to see. That's exactly what people want to talk about. Nobody wants to review that control. Nobody wants to review the escort, the 2CP. Everybody wants you to talk about that play.
Yeah.
How crazy it was. How crazy it was that Shu had 70 HP going on a flank and just hearing the call that it was winnable. Let me hear the comms. Obviously, I don't know that they have that like readily available when it comes to like the communications.
Definitely not the comms.
But like that's you. I don't know. I do side with Yiska here, just ever so slightly when it comes to like, yeah, that's a moment you just can't miss. I think we'd be saying the same thing if you took like a Widowmaker and gave him an open field, and it's just like, you have to hit these shots, bro.
I see what you're saying, but to me, it's more of a pick your poison. And the slightly weaker poison is I would rather just see what the hell is going to go. I'd rather see the preamble for the final fight of the grand finals.
Sure, I agree with you
rather
there.
than see a replay that we can look at later.
I agree.
Because like,
100%.
if we don't get that preamble, which some people might be like, why is that important? I'm like, okay, well, you
Yeah.
clearly don't know anything about narrative. You know, you need the setup. I need to see what the hell's going on. I need to know where Chengdu are standing on the map. I need to know where Glads are standing on the map. I need to know exactly where the ultimates are, who's got a potential, where the possible win conditions are, because we're heading into OT here. Super important as a color caster. I do not want to be looking at a replay at that specific moment in time. And if you throw me into a replay, you've kind of just you've denied any possible setup for this final fight of the fucking grand finals. So
I will
I'm
say,
glad there wasn't a replay personally for me.
I will say, like, maybe my gripe isn't actually with the production, but actually with the way Overwatch plays. Because in every other esport, you would just have that moment readily. You would have it with comms, you would have it in the downtime, whatever. Like, you would get that play, and it would be posted everywhere on social media. Now, the first time I saw that clip is because someone retweeted, like, one of the observers uploading their own clip onto twitter.com in shit quality with the worst video player ever. Like, and I had to make out those 3 pixels moving in very interesting ways in order to have any feelings to what that's. I'm sorry. Like, that has to be, like, that's just Overwatch then is just
straight.
like not satisfied.
The real solution, and this is some hardcore 2020 hindsight, the real solution would have been if we just caught it on the Observer Live at the time. That's the real solution.
Yeah. But I understand not having that because
it's like,
you kind of want to be on Jinmu with the blade, right? Like,
Of course, yeah, makes sense.
but as soon as Jinmu dies, and I think he dies second, maybe I'm completely wrong.
they were on Late Young, and then they were on Late Young, who, by the way, funny enough, wasn't putting Matrix on the window. I think he was surprised. Late Young was going for the kill into skewed. He gets DMX. Jinmu blades. They're actually still on Late Young's Baby Diva, and then Baby Diva dies, and then they're on Shu after that. So no, they don't get to see Jinmu. I think Jinmu dies too fast, and that's the other thing. Shu also deleted a blade. Just the impact of that play. I think everyone was stunned and surprised by how effective that was going to be.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, 100%.
So,
like, I don't blame the production or the observing team, including the replays, all that much. I think it really, for my gripes, it comes down to how is that not like the overarching celebration along with the Gladiators narrative, coming off of a break or even like leading into the break? How is that not something that you're just looping? As goofy as that might sound.
That's the thing, dude. Like,
it will be.
Like,
still plenty of opportunity.
This is like our Cold Zero jumps with wings up, blah 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 moment. Like, this is our simple clutch moment, and we're just like, it's sad that we won't see any recognition of that on the map. We won't, like, we didn't get to fully enjoy that moment while it happens. Probably not getting comps with that because maybe someone might have said a curse word. In other esports, they don't care. Right? Like, bleep it out or whatever it is, right? Like, I'm sure someone said, like, Shu, you're nuts or whatever. I want to hear that in the moment, right? Also, like, don't post, like, Glad's coming out with, like, a social media tweet going like, oh yeah, this is the winning, like, this is the moment when Shu, like, in 1.5 weeks, I don't care anymore then. You ruined the moment. Like, that's over. Like, I don't know. Like, there has to be a way. Maybe the game needs to change for that to be more accessible to us or whatever it is.
Slower game, Overwatch 2, 5v5, longer respawn times. You heard it here first. That's just my wish list.
What hell?
The problem is the gameplay's worse then, right? Like,
that's different. I don't know. That's worse. It's just different.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just
we're not getting down a rabbit hole. We're not going down a rabbit hole of that though. We're gonna finish talking about this very briefly because we've spent a long time on this recap now, and we haven't talked about MVP yet. So I don't know if there's anything else people want to add to the finals, as we kind of most of the conversation of the finals just ended up being about Shu's play and all that kind of stuff, and yeah, look, it ended up coming down to the wire. Leave showed a little bit of Widow on Havana. Havana ended up being the map 7. I'm still thinking, could there have been another map where maybe Chengdu could have won and just wrap this one up, but at the same time, they were really far behind, so no, not really. Glads were the ones at 3-1. So it's hard to. And part of me almost thinks that maybe Glads could have cleaned up earlier
Yeah.
than 4-2, 4-3. Could have been a 4-2 instead. So,
Not wrong.
yeah. Now that we let's officially shift gears a little bit. I assume everyone's done. I don't think there's too much more to talk about for the grand finals. We kind of gone pretty much into it. Now that we've seen all the people play, now that we've seen all the results, now that we've seen Shu's crazy good players, as all of the internet has wild recency bias towards Shu now, the official MVP and 2021 awards ballot were given out, and you know this is different from the public voting. So the public voting is only for the MVP, and that accounts for 25% of the total weighting towards the MVP award, and the 75% of the weighting comes from Overwatch League staff, broadcast talent, media, surrounding media, and just other people internally in the league. That's what Yiska and I were doing when we submitted ours. When did you submit yours? I'll share mine in a second. But did you submit yours quite early, or did you quite recently?
No. We had to till Sunday. I did it on Saturday, I think.
So the Saturday before the grand finals.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll be straight. I did mine before the finals weekend entirely. I did mine after play-ins. Sorry, after knockouts, but before the actual Hawaii matches.
I mean,
So
I will also say there should and was zero impact of whatever happened that weekend anyway. Like how you going to condense no matchup in my mind was so close that this weekend would have tipped the scales.
Swayed anything.
And that's what I had to argue to my stream earlier today. Some people are like, oh, I can't believe you did that. Like, well, you're just discounting count the cup. I'm like, no, I'm discounting recency bias because in my mind there should be no possible change, in my opinion, of where the awards are being placed due to one weekend's worth of games here.
Dude,
that should not change. If they are, then I'm a fucking slave to recency bias. Like, oh my god, I can't believe Shu. Oh, I better change my entire MVP vote to Shu now. Like, there's zero chance that happens.
It's the most frustrating situations are where you are fed up with the concept of recency bias. Like every season we talk about recency bias. If I read recency bias brought up as an argument, like most of the time I go like, duh. Like everybody knows, like it's not interesting anymore for you to bring that up. I'm annoyed by recency bias, and still, despite it being a deadbeat horse, right? We still haven't entrenched that in people, like on all levels. Apparently, it is unreal. Like, how much more can we point out that this is malware running on your brain OS? Like, it's basically like, it's there, dude. Like, that's malware. And you're like, yeah, I recognize this is malware. So are you going to do anything about it? Shu MVP, bro. Like, just don't. That is so annoying. Like, and in general, just like, take this seriously. It really, really matters. It matters towards the legacy of players. It matters towards the income of the players. Bro, the difference of what players make in terms of, like, if there's a role star thing attached to them or not is nutty. Like, that, it's not inconsequential. You are deciding history and you are deciding how lives go further. And it should be taken seriously. And you should probably, like, sit down with the statistics, review footage for every single pick you're making. It should probably be like a day that you take in order to decide. Unless
Wait, you mean I shouldn't just vote for my favorite player?
Dude, this it tilts me. It tilts me.
Also, yeah, you're right. It does affect income. It affects my income as well because, you know, Leave promised me that he'd share that $50,000 bonus with me. He said that he'd pay me $10 if I gassed him up to the rest of the world. And so, hey, look, you know, I'm all about it. $10 is $10 at the end of the day. I'm here to do my job. So, yeah, thank you, Leave, for eventually paying me that money. As you know, what it comes down to is my justification is just the fact that, you know, the only way the Countdown Cup tournament itself would change my mind on my picks is if I was sitting on the fence and incredibly undecided, and I need like just a tiny bit more evidence
Yep.
to sway either way. But
Yep.
the thing is, I was already decided. I wasn't sitting on the fence.
Yep.
I was very firm and I was very conclusive in my decision making, and so much so that I did not believe there could be any result that would change my mind. And lo and behold, there was no result that changed my mind. Zero.
Yeah.
Nothing changed my mind from this at all, as we will discover as we'll start moving some through some of these. So I don't know, does anyone else have any context, sort of preamble context as to why they made the choices they made?
Maybe
You know?
for because talking before the show, it seemed like Yiska definitely struggled on some picks, but this one felt pretty easy. I'm gonna
Really?
be completely honest. Yeah, I
So
Felt
are
easy
you
to me as
talking
well.
about the
I
role
struggled on a
stars?
couple, but it felt pretty easy for me.
Dude,
Uh,
the
give
stars
me the
wrecked
stars.
me. I don't know.
really, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I felt very strongly about a lot of picks coming into this. I think if anything, support. I had some questions that were quickly put to rest by way of the stats lab, and yeah,
Yep. Let's
pretty quick.
roll out the red carpet for our number one pick. Eric, do the honors. It should come to zero surprise for anybody. It's leave across the board. We've talked plenty about this in the past. Everyone has talked. We've on this show specifically talked about why we believe Lee was a front runner. So I don't know if there's anybody else that even wants to add anything to that. I think we've spent every single episode at least a little bit like, who's the MVP front runner? Is it still Leaf? Okay, good. And then we just move on again. So essentially, the cliff notes is best player, adds the most value to his team, has a great storyline as to why he's probably deserving anyway.
I think the honorable mention, right, is the interesting part, and I think there's only two names that you should be able to bring up, and none of them Shu, by the way.
True.
So I think the relatively close runner up, even though, yeah, I don't want to give too much away for the work I did, but like I think it wasn't actually particularly close when you consider everything. But Lip was second for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other guy you can bring up is Fearless, just because of like the melee performance and then the general performance in NA whenever he could play Winston, because nobody challenged him to that degree, right?
Sorry. I disagree, but
I think everyone else is probably too far away.
Yeah.
In terms of like how much have they played, how important is their play towards the team's outcome, how good are they in direct comparison to other competitors in their role. I think like for me, Lip and Fearless are the only other guys who can realistically really argue this season.
I definitely had a lot to think about in terms of the Lip leave side of things, even though I think towards the end I was very much on Leave's side of the fence. Lip is a clear second place to me. In fact, if I could just give out a second MVP, it would go to Lip, no questions asked. And I know there's this like a weird community narrative, by the way, where like I'm some like massive Leave peddler. Like in a way I am, because no one else talked about it. I think where it comes from is I was the first person to really publicly put his name into the hat. Because no one else had considered it yet. But here's something that people forget. I was also the first person to really publicly put Lip's name into the hat.
Yeah.
So I was heavily on Lip's train early on. And then I swapped trains over to the Leave train. So there was never a case where like from day one I was all about Leave. No, from day one I was actually about Lip. And then later on, as we moved through the different tournaments in the metas, I'm like, hang on a second, Leave is kind of really impressing me right now. And then I was 50-50 on them, and now I'm heavily over towards Leave as we got to the end of this regular season.
Yeah, that rung in my mind as well, where I guess if people don't remember you guessing up Lip, like the one thing that you pointed out pretty much to everyone was like how nuts he plays in the neutral, how much damage he does, and how quickly he builds EMPs, like how he's just like basically doing top damage despite like traces being in the game and whatnot. Like, so yeah, no, that is just like Lip is incredible. The problem is that his case is also hurt. Like depending on what kind of definition you adhere to, right? Like most valuable, is that most valuable in the highest discrepancy between like your teammates and yourself, or is that just being the best player in the world? The problem is both of those arguments like are muddled because of how good your teammates are, right? Like either it's hard to say if you're the best player in the world because the best healer in the world is healing you.
Yeah.
Or it's hard to say if you're the best player in the world when everyone on your team is like absolutely in contest for a RoTY award on their respective role. And I will say RoTY is also, especially towards support, is a little BS in how it's framed, because it almost like makes it very hard for main supports to get it. In comparison, right? So
Totally.
like, if you ask me who the best main support was this season, Lijigon is one of the top considerations for me there, just because of the completeness of the hero pool he had to cover, the level of at which he did it, the pop-off potential, like the game-changing of that. Like, he's probably my number one there. The problem is that we just have so many flex supports that are just also utterly incredible, right? But back to the point, like, if everyone on your team is nuts, I don't know if you can just only do the stuff that you do because everyone else is just like working very well, and that's a little bit what works against Lip.
I mean, we both settled that Leave was better, had better stake to the claim on both of those definitions, and both being the best player and also value brought to his team. And and to clarify as well, what I define as best player and how I justify that is a lot of this it's statistics and also some of the eye tests coming in as well. And who I deem to have the best mechanics, has reached the highest potential in their skill ceilings as well, and has shown the most skill. And skill is not just mechanics, but mechanics across a wide variety of heroes, meta proof, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it just goes to Leave easily. Without spending a whole podcast talking about Leave again, I think it's just more just recapping some of the thoughts on there. Rookie of the year. Do we all get the same Rookie of the Year?
Don't know.
I think we might have. And so, Rookie of the Year, to make it easy on you guys, everyone picked. Drum roll, please. We're not even going to do one. It's Pelican. It's got to be Pelican. Did anyone not pick Pelican?
No, I picked out
I have
Pelican.
Pelican.
We all picked Pelican. There you go. I didn't even know that we all picked Pelican. I just assumed we had smart people on the podcast. So there it is. We all picked Pelican. Does anyone want to be the person that has to explain why it's Pelican?
I mean, I can rattle you his top 3 statistics. So for his most played heroes being season wide, Echo, Tracer, and Mei, funnily enough. For Echo, he is 3rd most final blows per 10, 2nd most eliminations per 10, 2nd most hero damage done per 10 minutes, and top 10 within solo kills. Tracer, he's top 10 in final blows, 6th in elimination, 7th in hero damage. Mind you, this is across 20 teams with multiple Tracer players. And 2nd in solo kills for Tracer. And then on Mei, he's 3rd in final blows per 10, 4th eliminations per 10, and 1st in total hero damage done per 10 minutes. So
outside of stats though, like where do you sit in terms of Pelican's candidacy? Because it's not just about stats.
Oh, of course.
Was there more? There was got to be more there.
Yeah, 100%. Like, this is a kid who is a star, undoubtedly. Through the eye test, you can see him making plays. You can see him taking bold positions. You can see him, getting resources. He has the ball in his hands and he's making these shots. That takes a specific person. So I think that kind of checks off my ballot. You see him taking control of the game and really kind of like not dominating. I think that's more towards maybe Atlanta's detriment this season, where they've been a little bit inconsistent at the highest level. So I think that's kind of stymied him a little bit, but I don't think that definitely sways me. And I'm definitely somebody who throughout my career has been very keen to celebrate flexibility. Something that I think Pelican does in spades. Somebody who is I would deem colorless, who can do it all. He can play hit scan, he can play flex. You put him in a position, he's going to learn it, he's going to excel. And then to back it up, you have multiple statistics at world-class levels. I'm willing to give him a lot of leeway because of his eye test performance, right? You see him come out, he pops off, he has these big plays, he gets first eliminations, he gets clutch kills. And those are supported statistically. So it's like there is really not anybody else who has the full picture that Pelican does.
I think I apply the same. To me, Rookie of the Year is basically an MVP award for the rookies.
Yep.
And so I apply the same kind of definition in the metrics and the justification I would to the MVP to the Rookie of the Year. And by that definition, Pelican is like the leave of the rookies because the value he's brought to Atlanta has just been incredible. Like so transformative to this team. You look at Atlanta last year to what it is now, and Pelican is a big reason why Atlanta is the way it is in its success. And then on top of that, is like of the rookie players, I think Pelican's just been the most individually, mechanically gifted player of all of them. So it was an easy choice for me. Like there were some of the good shouts in there. Like Gargas had a good year, Monks had a good year, Khan did some cool stuff, but Paris hasn't really performed otherwise too well enough. Same story with Naga. Trying to think of any other rookies. Skewed actually was probably the big one, but for me, Skewed is. I don't know if Skewed falls into the exact same boat as Shu as far as recency bias goes, because I think Skew's been a fairly top main support for a while. Like, flex support playing the main support, but he unfortunately he does fall into that main support trap where like it's less flashy. He's done it does less on paper objectively when you look at it compared to what a DPS does. And so it's not that I don't think Shu had a good enough season, but I think Pelican's candidacy is just stronger, much stronger.
Dude,
100%.
Like we when we had the preview episode, right? Pelican was my expected rookie of the year. Now, did I have some doubts that this might not happen, right? In my mind, it was like, so Pelican was always a little bit in the shadow of Proper, right? And the problem is, like, he had to flex around that kid so much. And one way to frame it is, Proper is just like a generational talent, and even someone like Pelican has to do that. The other thing is Pelican actually did exactly that for Atlanta as well. The thing is, the vessel that he poured his skill into just required hard carry performances. That's what Atlanta needed. Pelican was water. The Atlanta vessel needed a hard carry in some metas, and he just did that. And when they didn't, he went on May and whatever, right? Yep. Like this kid still does the flexing around everyone. And I will also say, like, there's 4 people in Overwatch. Is it 4 or 5? Wait, let me count. That basically have a tracer and still fulfill the full definition of a flex DPS, right? It's Prophet, it's Fledder, I would say, it's Lip. I'm not sure if we can say Sparkle. I'm on the fence of that one, and it's Pelican, right?
Yeah.
So nobody else has that. Like, someone might have a tracer, and then they might have some other picks, and maybe they have a pocket Genji or whatever. They do not have the full range of heroes, right?
I assume you didn't add Leave there because Leave was just an exception. That I
should.
Everything.
No, I should have added Leave. That was 5th. Yeah, and I think I excluded. Yeah. Anyway, that is very unusual, especially to the elite level, right? And you could argue that Pelican maybe doesn't have a tracer like Leave. I think I would sign that as well. But to be able to have that and just be everything, like, just think of what the weaknesses around Edison and Kai happen for Atlanta Reign. And I like, it's not that Pelican just coincidentally is the puzzle piece that fits. He makes it fit. He adjusts himself around that. You could put this kid in every team and he would find the niches that this team needs. Like, a player like that is invaluable. He's just a gamer that sits down, does nothing else. Dude, the most iconic moment is like, there's like a, do you know Sophie Ann, the English teacher for Koreans in the Overwatch League?
Oh, yeah.
There is like a moment where Pelican is practicing English, and Sophie is like, there's like a line, I play the piano, or like, or something like about playing the piano, and Sophie asks like, Pelican, do you play the piano? And he's like, no, I only play game. And if you talk to his teammates and his coaches, then yes, that is exactly what Pelican does. He plays game. He goes to sleep, and sometimes he's in the hospital. But otherwise, this year he has played Overwatch, right?
He plays until his lungs give up.
Basically, yeah.
Nah, this kid is nuts. Like this, I don't know. I can't say enough about good stuff about.
I need to give some context because you mentioned Proper a few times, and for the people that don't watch Contenders, I don't know who Proper is. So Pelican comes from a team in Contenders' career called O2 Blast, which a lot of players have come from actually. And on that team last year, he played with a DPS called Proper, who I believe is probably next year's Rookie of the Year. Proper is easily the best player in Contenders' career right now. It's not even close. And on top of that, Leave we've described as a generational talent that is unique. There's only one other player that I've seen that can do what Leave does in terms of hero pool and then vertical skill on that hero pool, and that's Proper. And Proper's a 17-year-old kid waiting to dominate the Overwatch League.
Right.
Hopefully there will be an Overwatch League to dominate. As Proper is, he'll be 19, but no, he'll be 18. He'll be probably 30 years old by the time Overwatch 2 releases.
Exactly.
But Proper,
right with Half-Life.
Yeah, so but Proper, he's crazy. Proper was so good that he forced Pelican to pick around him. So Proper gets kind of first dibs on like what is the hero that Proper's going to play, and then Pelican has to support around them and be like, okay, well Pelican fills in this role now because that's what Proper is playing. That's kind of how that duo worked, and O2 Blast found a lot of success with that duo. I don't think you have space on a team for like two cracked up superstars that demand attention. You kind of need the one and then somebody else to kind of make that work. That otherwise I think you're going to have some conflicts in terms of who's getting the resources and who's getting the spotlight and who's getting what. So you can't have, I don't think you could have two Decays on the same team, for example. Not that Decay is that player. I think.
Sorry, keep on. I want to say something about Proper.
Pre would tell you that Decay is actually a pretty selfless player, but we're not getting into Decay storyline here. My point is like just to give some context to what you're saying, and why Pelican is so good. But yeah. Last thing about Pelican before we move on to Coach of the Year.
Sorry, really quickly about Proper and also Pelican.
Sure,
I think like these hyper flex players, right? My assumption is we are going to have Overwatch League next year on Overwatch 2, and a lot will change just by the nature of how that game plays and what kind of skills you require. If someone puts a gun to my head and asks me which players will make it to Overwatch 2 and transition seamlessly, then Proper and Pelican are some of those names to bring up, just because, like, if they're already this dude, if like I trust this kid to be a top pro in Valorant or whatever, like there's just like people they are just like so gifted at video games, it almost doesn't matter what you put them on, and they will find a way to be among the best in the world. Yes, there's like little like idiosyncratic attributes to each game that makes players shine in those specific areas more, but it's like, I don't know, like some just got it. Some have the grind, some have the understanding and the natural abilities to just get there. And like for Proper and Pelican, I'm pretty sure we'll also have fun with them in Overwatch 2, if they want to.
Yeah. I actually don't know how Leave did in PUBG. We nearly lost Leave to PUBG. I can't remember if he did well in that game or not, but it's a story for another day. Quick honorable mention. I think I've already kind of said it, but I think Skewed has to be an honorable mention. I don't know if there's a lot of other rookies that I'm heavily on. I think Pelican just again ticks all the boxes. So we'll move on to Coach of the Year real quickly. This is where we can bring up.
Can I just quickly say?
Yeah, bring one up.
For not the honorable mention, but the fact that we don't or can't say this year that Mag is an honorable mention would have been nuts. Like if we asked before the season, right? Like that's a notable thing that happened in the Overwatch League in 2021. Like it hurt.
Quite a few rookies just burned.
Mag,
quite a few.
And this is the thing as well for people that either don't watch Contenders or didn't pay attention, which is fine. I mean, it's whatever. But basically, Mag, I would have said that coming out of Contenders' career last year, Mag was the number one prospect, the number one pickup, the number one most sought after player out of Contenders. Definitely more so than Pelican. Yeah. And now Pelican's like your Rookie of the Year. Mag is not even on the list.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yep.
I think maybe Washington had something to do with that. Maybe Mag just kind of suffered in that program. It's a lot of different factors, but yeah,
Maybe-
it's
Maybe main tech is just very hard. Maybe it's currently the hardest role to play, just based on seeing how few people actually cover the full hero pool, right?
which is why Mag was impressive because he made main tank look like a carry position when he was
Yeah.
on Runaway.
Yeah.
Like he was like the one of the key factors that kept Runaway super powerful and competitive.
Yeah.
So there's a story of Mag.
Agreed.
All right, Coach of the Year. We might as well show my graphic here because I so we can do the whole thing for because we aligned on 2 of them already. I don't know how many people aligned with my Coach of the Year. I suspect that a reasonable amount maybe will. We'll have a look here. So I have Rush as my Coach of the Year. Does anyone not have Rush as their Coach of the Year? Joe does not have Rush. So let me go first then, and then we'll go to you, Joe, really quickly. Oh, and then maybe Yiska can back me up as well. Why is Rush the Coach of the Year? First of all, there weren't a lot of choices for Coach of the Year. There's a lot of people that weren't on the list. Second of all, a lot of assistant. Well, actually, there were no assistant coaches on the list because I think you have to be a head coach to to make it to be a candidate. So I was actually quite keen to give it to Unter, if anybody, Unter or RoTY. Because I think Unter's transformative success on the Atlanta Reign just can't be overshadowed. But of the coaches remaining, I think Rush is a solid pick for me because I think he's had less to work with than say Moon has on the roster. Moon's got like 9 players, and he's had multiple roster changes. He can just do whatever he wants. He doesn't have to worry about too much. It's like, yeah, should we just get who are you? Yeah, just bring on. Should we get developed? Yeah, just bring them on. Yeah, did we start the season with DM and Erster while still having Lip and Flatter? Is that just like 4 superstar DPS on one team? Yeah, it's just whatever. I'm just Moon, just Moon stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas Rush is just like, bro, can I get a hit scan? Are there any hit scans? No. Oh shit. Can I get a hit scan within this year in a timely manner? No. Okay, if that's whatever, I just work with what I got then. Moon has had such little to work with in comparison.
Yeah.
And generating the amount of success that he's had on Dallas. Let's not forget that Dallas has been a bit of a meme as a team for like 3 years running, and Rush, with the rest of the staff, has turned this franchise around. Oh baby, has the franchise turned around big time, due to those efforts. Excellently constructed roster. Yes, it had some holes, but let's be clear, they didn't know that they were going to lose Exy.
No.
So, aside from that, it was an excellently constructed roster. And the whole visa thing, like that's not their fault. You can maybe you could have argued they could have picked up a different hit scan, but they went with Pine, and it just took it forever to get Pine in. That's just what immigration is like.
Yeah.
So they made it work. They won tournaments. They were dominant. They literally defined the June Joust meta. They came out and from day one played, their specific. I call it Rush's Rush, the Lucio Amore stuff. And they defined the entire meta for an entire stage, not just in NA, where they were the best team and everyone copied them, but also in APAC when NYXL and Shanghai played in June Joust, and they're like, fuck it, I guess we have to do Lucio Moria too, and they then played that as well. So it is very defining of what Dallas and Rush have done this year, and that's why Rush is my coach of the year.
Fair play.
Yeah.
Shout.
No, like I will say, if I had more options on the ballot, I might have picked differently. Because once again, I am big on making a lot out of a little. And unfortunately, the Paris coaching staff wasn't up for selection. If they were, I'm still not sure, given like all the limitations that Dallas had and how much success they had, that I wouldn't have given it a rush anyway. I think generally speaking,
hang on, what are you saying? If Get Amazed was on there, would you have given it to Get Amazed? I'm confused.
I mean, for me, coach of the year is not about the head coach, right? It's about the entire team, because nobody can actually figure out. What I can attest to is like coaching decisions, as in who's substituted, what maps are picked, like what strategies are being run, how does a team improve, what are they doing?
For the sake of
right,
the sake of this, which is literally just a head coach.
Right.
Because I agree, I think it should be coaching staff of the year, but because the award is literally just coach of the year and specifically head coach, would you have gone for Get Amazed if he was eligible?
I would, in that instance, because of that, I would have voted for Paris Eternal. Maybe. Okay. I'm not sure. just because like the discrepancy between you do not have a lot of resources, you are already getting picked in your own region by the team that's like more successful and probably has more draw for you. You're starting out with one person. You're playing on ping. The other team that's supposed to be better than you is not getting off the ground at all, while you're playing at 50% win rate this season. And you also don't just get those 7-7 scores. I think it was in the end. It wasn't 7-7. Was it 8-8? 8-8, yeah.
Yep.
You don't just get it by like farming the bottom tier teams. Yes, they had, I believe, London twice, but they also punched up a bunch of times, right? So in that, like, once again, I've said it before, this had a very like Valiant season 3 feel for me, like a very packing feel, and that's like what coaching is to me, to make the most of the least. That said, I also recognize that being a coach of the Dallas Fuel comes with a lot of pressure. It comes like there were some question marks to me this season, especially in regards to the backline. That, I mean, I don't think Jax has ever looked better in his career after like the one season he had with Element Mystic. I think Fielder is a different flex support than other flex supports, just by the nature of what kind of teams he has to support, but he did so flawlessly. And then yes, the Exian like situation with like not getting Pine and whatnot. Yes, you could argue maybe that made them more unique, and therefore they even had a chance. I'm not like, that's not what I'm voting on in terms of hypotheticals, even though like I don't think that's a low probability chance. What I'm seeing is someone had not a wide roster, he had full like responsibility on building that roster. So everything we see in that roster is quite clearly his doing. Won a stage title. He made it to another final. Made it to third Hawaii as well. Despite all the downsides of that roster, and yes, he had a lot of resources because otherwise you don't get players like Sparkle.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
But in the end,
money,
yeah. But money only buys you so much when you're in the region that can't get visas for the best player pool. And in that, like, without slighting Moon, and it feels like we're doing that often, even though I will say I also didn't think he was my coach of the year last year, but that job from the outside just looks much easier to do than whatever Rush would need to do and Get Amazed would need to do. So yeah, I in the end I gave my vote to Rush as well.
Do you guys feel comfortable listing out the ballot for Coach of the Year, just so that the public knows? Is that something you can do?
I mean, I was told that I can talk about my picks. I'm not sure if I can talk about.
I don't know about that.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
I don't know. It's never announced. It's not like I don't know.
Yeah,
I decided not to tell my. I've already said who it wasn't, so you can just guess at this stage. But
right.
No, I guess I haven't received permission to. I don't know if I risk it or not. I'm not too sure. Maybe I'll just tell you in private later.
Yeah.
But Joe, you didn't have Rush. Who did you have and why?
Yeah, I had Rush coming in at a very, very narrow second. Primarily for the reason that AVRL had previously mentioned, where Rush quite literally had a definitive style that the Globe basically adopted and said, "Oh yeah, you figured something out. This is actually right. We don't know how to deal with this. We're gonna have to, reverse engineer this." And I do value that quite high. But I think both of you had actually mentioned or alluded to a very strong point that I quite liked for Chengdu Hunters head coach Rui. Hopefully I'm saying that right. AVRL, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The way that I kind of came to this was kind of a tiered system, kind of went like this. Definition of style was what I, judged the highest, right? If I'm looking at a coach, if I'm coming from, any kind of familiarity with sports, I want to see what this coach is doing differently to anybody else, right? Secondly, I judged the use of the roster and or their bench. Hearing verbal confirmation, hearing tales of, you know, Rui bringing in people for mental resets, really utilizing that bench, having to deal with Elsa's departure, bringing in Late Young, seeing how much he has improved. And then on top of that, you know, having some sort of success, I do weigh their I don't strip Dallas away from their title and their multiple finishes and how successful they've been. Um, but for me, I think Rui edged it out specifically with the personnel management side of things, dealing with the big roster, integrating them all with success. And then on top of that, having a plan in place to kind of either bring them out to see the game, like you mentioned, Avril, or bring people in to kind of give them a morale boost, like Yiska had mentioned with Ame. I think that's immeasurable. I think that's entirely worth the award, I would say.
Cool. I like that. I like that a lot. Rui would have a big sort of honorable mention to me. But I think we're in the essence of time. Let's move over to role stars now. So I think we're pretty much all aligned here outside of that one pick.
Okay, now it's getting hard.
Personally, for me, I probably would have looked towards Rui as well. I might have even have picked Rui, but he wasn't on the list. So
Yep.
role stars.
Yep.
Role mixed stars here as let's go through DPS first. Just to speed it up, we're not going to go through them one by one. I'm just going to give you my entire list of 4, talk about it briefly. You guys can tell me if you had different players on and why, or if you agree with me, and we'll sort of work it from there. So, DPSs. Hang on, where were my DPSs? So my DPSs, very quickly, Lip, Leave, Pelican. Okay, pretty standard here. Leave, my MVP. Pelican, my Rookie of the Year. Lip, my runner-up and MVP. Very simple choices. Hard to argue against them. If these guys were my top players in, as far as awards go to start with, very clear that I was just going to put them on my role stars list. 4th position, I gave to Sparkle. A couple reasons for this. One, there was a nice sort of symmetry here with having one of each player from the top 4 dominant teams this season. So, you know, put a Dallas player in there. Second of all, is that I think Dallas has been a also pretty important part of the Dallas field to find them success. This team isn't just about fearless. I think a lot of people look at Dallas and like, oh, it's the fearless team. No, there's a lot of different pieces on there that make that team work. Sparkle among them. Doha's played more of a supportive role on this team, as they do. You know, when Element Mystic were together, when Sparkle and Doha were that DPS duo, Doha usually takes a bit more of a backseat, kind of like when Pelican played with Proper. I use that example a lot between Doha, Sparkle, Pelican, Proper. Also because they also played against each other in contenders at one point. Sparkle has still, to me, got some of the highest highs on specific heroes like Genji and Doom.
Yep.
And he's kind of had to adapt and learn and be on some uncomfortable positions on this team as well, where he wasn't known for the Tracer. He's never really been known on Tracer the entire time I've casted him, even in contenders.
True.
Tracer wasn't really his hero. But here he's come in, he's had to improve big time on Tracer. And by the end of it, I think he had a very good Tracer. Like at first I was like, yeah, it's kind of serviceable. Now it's like, damn, this guy's really competing. Okay, sure, it's not Lips Tracer, it's not Leaves Tracer, it's definitely not Striker's Tracer, but it's more than good enough to get Dallas across the line. And I think Sparkle played a very important role for this team. Part of me thinks maybe could it have been Kevster? Yes, but I wasn't going to buy into the recency bias. Also, I picked this list before Glads won the tournament, before I even saw the Countdown Cup. So that just wasn't going to be there. And also, if Kevster's one performance in tournament was gonna shift me over to putting him on the role stars, then I have zero integrity at that stage. So it just wasn't going to happen. So Sparkle's my pick.
Right. So for me, I have everything like Avril. I just have Flatter instead of Pelican. Now, that one might be controversial. I think
you have Sparkle.
Yes, I have Sparkle. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. For pretty much the same reasons. I think like it's very, very impressive for him to have a Tracer like that. I think also like it's interesting how he made Tracer work, because it's very Sparkle-ish in how he creates value a ton with bombs. Like his stick, I think he might have the highest sticky rate in the Overwatch League. And it's not just like sticking tanks, right? Like he just gets a lot of value out of his bombs, which makes sense for someone that generally like excels at ability characters, right? Like Genji like do. So yeah, that just made perfect sense to me. Yes, and it kind of forced like a play style. It kept just like Fearless. I don't think you can play or can sort of play around Fearless that way and that aggressively if you don't have like a guy like Sparkle being able to back that up.
Yep.
I feel like I have to be defensive about the Flutter pick. Now, I think first and foremost, let me like disarm everyone with voter fatigue towards Flutter, because I think there's a big bias going on against like giving someone an award that has won it all last year, right? Like where it's like, but he already has MVP, like, and he wasn't as clearly MVP this season, so he deserves it less. The bottom line question is like you can't see it through those lenses. You have to see it through, is he a top 4 DPS in the league? Now, it was very, very close, right? Between Pelican and Flutter. I still think, like, bottom line is, Flutter wins 2 championships. Bottom line is, he still looks like top tier on Tracer. Like, Lip and Flutter, you can, it's like, they like mid-flight just like throw controllers and just like, now you pick this hero, and like they're just having fun, just flexing around each other, just being just as good, like top 5 Tracers, tossing the pick around. In order to have that in the back pocket, like once again, it's super hard to have that. I think like if we're arguing who was more important towards the team's success, that is Pelican, but that's not what this award means to me. Right, this award means top 4 DPS player in the Overwatch League, and once again, like Flutter is the meta. I think like he has a like he had to show a little bit more. He also had to get on picks that aren't historically like the typical Flutter picks. He just impressed me over the entire season, and was also a big reason why they were able to win it in the end. So. Okay. While I think that's a controversial one, especially over Pelican, which I fought with for a long time, in the end, all that there is that Chengdu has to show is 2 trophies, right? And whatever you might think, like by the eye test, whatever, like, and yes, 2 trophies is also noisy, because what if he was carried by his, but I'm sorry, trophy case has to be considered when it comes to naming the best players, because that is the most obvious tell that someone is a good player or not, right?
I thought my Sparkle pick was controversial. Joe, did you have any differences yet?
Funnily enough, we all have the relative same picks. I have Leave, Lip, Pelican, with my last, funnily enough, being Fleta. I have left out Sparkle.
We all came back to pretty much the same thing.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
1 or 2 differences. Literally, I think there's just one out of all of them. Sparkle, for me, while I 100% see how valuable he is for the Dallas Fuel, in terms of style, in terms of hero pool, I have a very love-hate relationship with Sparkle. I have not been particularly fond of his Echo play this year, and I think that's what really turned me off. That, along with a lot of the first death eliminations that he kind of does often toss away ever so often. While his Tracer has been much improved, I don't know that it still hangs with the players that I've picked. And on top of that, again, I'm a flexibility stan, so yep, I see these guys as valuable and impactful.
Why don't you start us off for the next category on tank? You just list your 4.
Can I gotta get it out of my system. I gotta say, honorable mentions. I mean, I sat there with tears in my eyes, putting the X where my heart wanted it to be, taking it away. But like, if I was to adhere to the notion that MVP is like the most valuable player for a team, so highest discrepancy between team and player, I think Prophet was so important to Seoul's success this year. Like, if you look at him statistically, he's the second most lethal DPS after Leaf in the league in terms of killing blows per 10. If you look at the amount of heroes he has to cover, it's once again like it's not Leaf level, but it's still very, very solid.
Yep.
So Prophet would have been a runner up, and then Pelican, of course. I mean, I need to mention because for the aforementioned reasons, like that was definitely a runner up for me as well.
Yep. Similar thoughts. I
Cool.
think Prophet and Sparkle probably would have been mine.
All right, Joe, roll through your 4 tanks and maybe only just talk about or talk about what you want to, but don't feel the need to go through all 4 of them. Just like any that you feel need explaining. Talk
100%.
about the ones you feel need explaining, because some of them will probably be straightforward. So
I think this one for tanks and supports both years. I think a lot of my talking is going to be like the handicap that I've given myself, especially with tanks and supports. I think Yiska had alluded to this earlier, that it's really not fair to kind of list tanks as a role, as much as DPS is a different deck of cards. I think tanks have to be divided personally into main tanks and flex tanks, and same with supports. So I've done that moving forward. But for my tanks, I have Fate and Fearless, and Hanbin and Void are my tanks. I don't think I need to explain much.
So just Dallas Shanghai tank lines.
Pretty much.
Okay. Cool. I have the same list, but I have Gaga and I have no Fate.
Okay.
And I think there was a little bit of discussion early on where I think I've been one of the people here on this panel that is a little bit less on the Fate train. That's not to say I don't think Fate is good. I think Fate's been fantastic for Shanghai. But this wasn't going to be a free pass for Fate for me. I think Fate had to do a bit of catch up to slide into that ball position. I think there was a bit of a sort of identity crisis for Fate and the Dragons a little bit earlier on, where it just felt like Fate was the odd one out. And it wasn't until we get to June Joust and he shows up on this ball that was suddenly like, oh my god, Fate's arrived, guys. So I've got Gaga on this list because I feel like Gaga has been a transformative play for the Chengdu Hunters and a big part of their success outside of Leave. And someone that, like, last year Chengdu without Gaga and with only Among is just, it was a bit of a meme team. Let's be clear, they were second to last, just above London, who were the last place team in APAC. And now with in terms of new players coming in, Gaga being one of the new players, like Leave was on the team last year. So that hasn't changed. But Gaga being one of the new players has really transformed what this team can do, specifically around their tank line, to suddenly enable different styles of gameplay and more even, solid, consistent games that Among, I think, wouldn't give you. So that's where I put Gaga in there. Is like, if I'm not going to put it to Fate, who's it going to be for me? I also wanted a bit of a clear split: 2 flex tanks, 2 main tanks, and the next main tank for me on my list was Gaga after Fate. So there it is.
Fair.
Yeah. Well,
this will be good.
Those of one mind. Those 3 of one mind. No, I actually have Fearless, Fate, Void, and Gaga. So I don't have Hanbin.
Wow. So we are once again just pretty much all there.
Right.
Incredible.
So I feel like not having Void this year is slander. I said as much. I think, like, once again, we gotta recognize potential, like, far offshoot chance, but potential GOAT candidates, and give them the accolades that they deserve. It's not enough. Like, this Void has never not been. No, that's actually wrong. But
Glads might have a word
for a significant, let's say,
after Glads, then
yes.
Even on Glads, I think he was crazy.
Okay.
I think you would have to think really hard for him to be outside of top 5 flex tank since Apex Season 2.
Yep.
Like, nobody's this consistent over their career in terms of, like, the role isn't flashy. He isn't getting the flashiest kills. He's not particularly known for his bombs. Like, he doesn't get the sickest, like, whatever. If you want, like, what's it called? The Graviton Flux.
Sure.
like it's not flashy, but it's consistently top tier, right?
Yep.
So having Void in there, I think kind of was important to highlight that. Dude, I had Hanbin locked in very often, like easily runner up for me as well, like was very close. My first, like I saved it, was like, okay, I'm going to send this over tomorrow. And then I think I put Gaga instead of Hanbin because I thought Gaga was more important in terms of like how the Hunters played this year. Just like being a complete main tank, and yes, it's easier when you start as a ball and work yourself through the rest of the lineup than the other way around, as we found out this season. But like Gaga was so important to what's the Hunter's success and their ability to play the comps that they did. So had to have him in it there. But yeah, it unfortunately feels a little bit like I'm snubbing Hanbin, but you only got 4 votes. Like what can you do?
Stuff.
Real quick, did anyone have a consideration for Hawk? Because I think Hawk for me was an honorable mention.
Yes, agreed. And I think that's also a name we don't talk enough about. It's pretty much the only one, and Space, that you could even bring up.
I would say Space, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of there are plenty of honorable mentions that I think I wouldn't be upset at to see on
like
a ballot anywhere. Who would I be upset to see?
I feel like, okay, so Piggy was done dirty by the hero pools, I feel.
I guess.
I mean, if you're a player that gets done dirty by hero pools, I don't know if
then you have issues.
Good enough to get on the list.
Yeah.
True.
I think he looks great when you give him the pick, but if there's no pick, what do?
Let's be real. Hanbin was a Sigma 1 trick until he wasn't, and now he's looking like one of the best divas, and this guy didn't get screwed by the hero pool.
You're right. You're right. Yeah.
Good player,
so,
but
yeah,
I'm not doing a Kareev again.
Yiska, would you like to, speaking of Kareev, would you like to kick us off for our support list? So just name all
oh my
4
god,
support.
This is where we're going to fight, I think.
I don't think so.
No, I think
I have a spicy one. I feel like I want to go last here. I have a decent spicy-ish kind of one here. So Yiska, you go first. Joe, you go second. And again, just don't explain every single player. Just explain maybe the one you think is contentious or controversial.
So I feel like I have probably 3 controversial players, maybe 2 maybe. I have Fielder, Izayaki, Alarm, and Shu.
Okay.
So I guess I think the most controversial might be Alarm, right? Would you agree?
I mean, I think I won't speak for AVRL, but I definitely locked myself out of just flex supporting everything. So I have main supports on.
I will say this, Yiska. Without spoiling much, I also have Alarm, but I'm going to let you explain why Alarm.
Okay. So like it is really hard to figure, like, to be a support in a team that isn't doing well or doing too well, not going to Hawaii, not whatnot. It's just like if you want to have a good evening, just like sit yourself into the replay viewer and look at Alarm. Dude, this guy 100%. No player is like this, where the best expression I've always found for why Alarm is incredible and almost reminds me of like exceptional WoW players is WoW Arena is he has an incredibly high mental tick rate, and he's just able to pick up on more information and use that effectively than anyone else I've ever seen in play in Overwatch. Like, it's not that he has sick mechanics. It's not that he has like super sick awareness or something. Like, it's like other players have the feeling of like, oh yeah, this is a bad position to be in. For Alarm, it feels like he doesn't have these zones that are like dangerous where he shouldn't go. He seems to be able to reevaluate the situation and the angles where he can stand at based on all the information that he's constantly being fed. That has to be through comms, that has to be through the sounds that he hears, and of course what he sees. And to that degree, like his ability to also toss heals, effective heals around, and keep teammates alive at a sliver of a health. Like sometimes you're so pressed for like trying to help everyone. Nobody does that better than Alarm as well. I guess like why I have Fielder in there as well is because I feel like what Fielder does is just like there's no better pocket than Fielder, which also facilitated Sparkle. But yeah, like I don't know, dude. Like get this kid on a great team, and you will instantly once again start seeing why that is true.
You could argue he is on a good team, but for whatever reason, that team just isn't clicking. I think the individual pieces are fantastic. I'm on board with you in terms of Alarm, Joe. I apologize, but I said you were going to go second. I'm going to put myself second now, but for good reason. You'll find out why. Because what'd you second? You had Izayaki, Shu, Alarm. I have those three, but I don't have Fielder. I have Lee Jae-gon. So
yeah, I don't
we've actually aligned really closely to support somehow. It's kind of wild. Alarm for very similar reasons. Obviously, I just think Alarm's just been fucking crazy. Like the fact that he plays this well while his team is shitting the bed is unbelievable. If I was going to replace by the way, it does hurt that I don't have Fielder. But if I was going to replace anybody on my list to put Fielder in, I'd probably take out Shu. And for anyone that wants to be like, oh yeah, because we talked lots about Shu in the recency bias thing. Again, I locked this in before the Countdown Cup tournament weekend, which means I didn't even see the Shu play. The Shu play had no impact on this. I had Shu locked in prior to that. And that's just a nod to, I think, Shu being the best BAP in the league currently. Bringing a ton of value towards Glads. I should probably explain Lee Jae-gon pick because that's the one that we differ on. I didn't want this just to be flick support, the role. This, to me, it wasn't just going to be everybody's flick support, wrap it up, tie it up, and send it away. For me, if I was going to include a main support, and I just have the one main support, to me, the best main support has been Lee Jae-gon. Widest hero pool, high mastery on all those heroes. People say he feeds, but I like a player that's willing to make plays. I don't want a passive player. I like Animo, but I don't want a passive player like Animo. I want someone like Lee Jae-gon that's going to make shit happen. Lee Jae-gon has serious carry potential on a main support role. When main support is not a carry position, it never has been, but somehow this guy does it. Somehow this guy has kill pressure in a role that you will normally never have that. I just think he's had an incredible season. Easily the best main support in my opinion. The most meta-proof one. When you have situations where Moth and FD God are being benched and Violet's playing Lucio, nah man, if Lee Jae-gon was on that team, you wouldn't bench this guy. There's no reason to.
Agree.
Oh. What do you
So, weirdly enough, even locking myself to 2 and 2, we share a lot of similar picks. For flex support, I have Shu and Izayaki for a lot of the same reasons that we've mentioned. I won't, claim that I put in my ballot or lack thereof before the Countdown Cup. However, I'm not surprised, funnily enough, that Shu is able to come out with those clutch potentials. I think statistically he's the best BAP. I think he's probably the best performing flex support this season, if I had to pick one. Izayaki narrowly coming in close. I don't know. I mean, that's not even fair to say. I don't know that. I think they probably have the same kind of playmaking potential, especially looking at some of Izayaki's stage final performances. Specifically on Ana. I think he really comes alive when the pressure hits him. And statistically, he's just as dominant as Shu, but I think Shu kind of tops some charts where Izayaki maybe wanes a little bit. Definitely is a little bit more consistent for me, at least. So I have Shu, Izayaki as my flexes, and Lee Jae-gon and Yveltal as my main supports. Funnily enough, and I've had to double check this on while we're recording this. But first and final blows per 10 minutes on Brigitte. First in eliminations with 15.4. Next highest is skewed with 13.3. First in hero damage done. First in healing. Yveltal, and I don't think I need to really bring up the Mercy. It's synonymous at this point with the guy. I have been significantly impressed with how bulletproof he is. No matter where you put him, no matter where the dead body is, he's swooping in for a res. If you're talking about a playmaker, I think Yveltal is definitely somebody who makes plays subtly under the radar to bring Chengdu into a lot of these games where they probably have no business doing. Nisha definitely an understudy that performs to a similar degree, but statistically, Yveltal does not lie.
I was going to press you on that. I wanted to press you because to me, Yveltal and Nisha have been interchangeably 1-to-1. Like you could put either of them in and they'd perform well. So what pushed you over for Yveltal instead of Nisha? Because if you're gonna put Yveltal in, I think you have to ask yourself, should I just put Nisha in instead, right?
Definitely. One of the big reasons I'm gonna be completely honest with you, it was just the sheer surprise at like how bulletproof, and I'll reiterate again, like this kid is a facilitator through and through. Not only have I been impressed by his Mercy for years now, but this season I think he's been pivotal in seeing the Chengdu Hunters kind of advance and have this growth spurt. But his Brigitte's like statistics, I mean, it made sense when looking at it, but I didn't think it was going to be this high. Like season wide, he's pounding, just putting up numbers.
He made that joke about he was looking at his own stats and he's like, but he had like one bad stat where he dies a lot. Maybe he has high deaths or something. He's like, oh yeah, because I don't raise my shield up. And then he made the erectile dysfunction joke about not raising. I don't know if you guys caught
not getting it up. No, I didn't. But that's hilarious.
Not getting the shield up. Cool. I mean, I like that list. I like that list a lot. I applaud you for actually adding a second main support. So we've gone from Yiska having 0 main supports, me to 1, to you having 2. So
we're still not that far off, to be fair.
I am impressed with how close we were, because I think a lot of us were like, oh man, this is going to be so wild. And Yiska's like, oh dude, I think I've like 3 he reads his list like, bro, we have like the same list outside of one player. I'm like, this is crazy. So oh man, we aligned super well. It's why I don't know, are we like a hive mind here, like the 3 of us just like
I just think there's correct picks.
Oh, there you go. That's the correct opinion, my friend.
Joe said it. Joe just put it out there. Not me. I didn't say that. Joe just put it out there. Oh, that's the word right there. Whoo, some people are gonna be tilted by that.
It's also people that watch both regions to an unhealthy amount, right? Like, I think that's always going to tend you. Like, if you catch every NA game and only that, then you will just like, even if you do your homework afterwards, like it will have a different impression on you. If you consistently keep up with both regions and watch those, I think it just leaves for, or makes for a different sense making the scope.
All right.
Well, I'll say this, banter aside, I think that a lot of awards, and I think we've definitely covered this, are subjective, and you can apply different rules. Obviously, Coach of the Year for Yiska is different from Coach of the Year for me, is different from Coach of the Year, and that drastically shifts. So I'm, jokes aside, I'm not here to judge anybody's predictions. I may disagree, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the right to vote whoever they choose, right? So,
I mean, I'm not publicly judging, but I'm judging.
Hey, you fall on that sword.
Have, I think, just enough time for our final segment here. So we'll make this just a brief one. It is a season retrospect, because now we've concluded the regular season in its entirety. 0 games left in the regular season. Multiple teams have been eliminated fully. We've now locked in teams for play-ins and playoffs. What were some of the biggest surprises, and or just things you're impressed by over the regular season that maybe you didn't expect, stuff like that? I think for me, it has been I'll say it into the other end. I think for me, I always expected Glads to be this top team at some stage. In my preseason ranking, I had them very high up. Obviously, there was a lot of scrimbucks there, but I was confident. I confidently put Glads as my number 1, and now finally seeing them come to you and win a tournament. To me, it's just like, damn, there it is. Finally, we got there. We got the Glads in there. I'm just so happy to see them finally take a title.
Yeah.
He's insufferable. He's insufferable. He's insufferable.
You already know, dude.
The problem I saw was that smirk, and I'm like, oh, God.
The thing is, like, I think in hindsight, the things that I got wrong in my preseason power rankings. So, it took some teams like a lot of time to actually get up to a speed that we were always seeing in scrims, right? And B, the other one that I got very wrong was Dallas Fuel. Now, I have like 3 or 4 NA interviews where I talk to players and I ask a question, which teams are you surprised? Like the fun part. That's the fun part. I always ask like, which team does better in scrims but worse in the actual matches? And they're like, they're sort of like close to their scrim performance. Some like maybe Gladiators gets mentioned. They then, like, because it's such an anomaly, switch it up and say, you know what? But the other thing is the case where Dallas Fuel is constantly bad in scrims, and then they hit the live server and they clap you for no reason. So, like, they have that reverse switch, which there were other teams in the past that were like reverse scrim warriors, where they performed badly in scrims. Actually, I think Shock might be. Shock season? No, I'm not sure. Would have to think about this again. But, like, therefore, it also makes sense if I overvalue Scrimbucks. I completely got Dallas Fuel wrong. In general, of course, NYXL as well. I think in the end, they're not, like, they never were the second best APAC team. They were definitely better than sixth, though, at the end.
Totally.
Actually, where would you put, like, if you had to do power rankings currently in APAC, where would you put them?
Hot take. That's tough because that's mega recency bias.
I mean, that's power rankings,
Fifth.
right?
No, I know.
Fifth?
I saw them fifth. One of
below,
100.
below Fusion?
Below Fusion and so I
not sure
still
below
believe.
Fusion.
Fuck it.
Yeah.
No, okay. You know what? Power rankings right now. So we're not talking about who I believe is going to be better moving
Yep.
forward. So just right now, then okay, sure. Fourth and the Fusion fifth.
Yeah.
Well, I think Fusion they have a second win coming because they have an open meta, and that's what they've been fucking waiting for.
They
kind of fun to do
fucking
with.
better, man. God, I'm gonna be so
I'm
sad.
also ready to be disappointed. I'm
Look at
very
this.
ready to be
Yeah.
disappointed about Fusion again.
I'm not sure if you're torturing yourself or also torturing the Philly fans with that hopium you just shared. Like,
I mean, I like to set it up like bowling pins, dude. I put the 10 pins down and I bowl that strike straight into the Philly fans. I don't know if you had anything else to add there, Yiska. Otherwise, Joe, we'll get your thoughts on what were
I
your
got
sort
some
of
names.
or some other stuff you
okay,
about the season.
let me put some stock into this. So
Go for it.
I don't think Fusion can come back. I think that's unfortunately the. So
Good
if
cop, bad cop.
what can we do? I guess
Their one saving grace. If
Okay.
I can jump to your defense.
Yeah.
Echo.
Yeah.
Are you
think I want to see Shockwave on
Shockwave, yeah.
Echo so bad.
is what is actually going to help them win, not fucking Echo. Anyway, Joe, please talk to me about your season retrospectives.
Justice, I have some words. How?
Okay, here we go.
Spark, I have some words. Many people accurately predicted I was huffing that sweet, sweet pink hopium, copium, whatever the kids are saying these days. How? Philly gets a pass. We understand. Visas are a bitch.
Yeah.
All right.
Houston top 5, well done. Didn't think they'd get top 5 in NA, but barely squeak in. Paris, congratulations on a job fantastically well done. Again, I will not stop singing the praises of Avala. I think she and Get Amazed had a fantastic approach, not only to building the team, but how they structured it, especially acting late, if memory serves, to the roster signing window. Yeah. Well done, Glads. Well done, Dallas. Yeah, but how, though? How are we screwing up Shy? How are we screwing up Mag? How? What happened?
Ash got banned. That's what happened.
True.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, like there's definitely a couple of big disappointments. I think NYXL is unfortunately one of them for me. I think, to be fair, like, despite me being probably one of the guys that had Mayhem ranked the lowest of the power rankings I saw, I still think, like, that's a disappointment as well. Just like, because on paper we did like a documentary, mini doc on Mayhem called Learning to Win Again. We specifically looked at OG and whatever that that situation was and how OG could never break through, right? And we ended the video on like the question if that can be like the season where he redeems himself and where like he brings it all together and everything works and that team shines with him and whatnot. And unfortunately, just by the evidence that we got provided, like unfortunately that dream didn't come through, and I'm not sure where that leaves his career at this point. So it is like, I think it's still like cool to see how that story or that narrative played out, because it was one of the focal points of the Mayhem season. Unfortunately, not all, like this isn't a Disney movie, and Mayhem apparently definitely isn't the Disney princess. So yeah, it's an unfortunate season. And then one of, like, you gotta say, Spitfire is also a disappointment.
Yeah,
this
I was
season.
gonna add that in coming in. Like, I love a lot of the players. You know, a lot of the coaching staff. God bless them. It's a disappointment for sure.
Well, some seasons are over. Some seasons do continue for the rest of the teams. Obviously, we kind of noted a few disappointments in there. But you know, teams like Philly still have an opportunity. Teams like Hangzhou still have an opportunity. We'll see how far they can get. Boston's still in the play somewhere. They've had a reasonable season. It's definitely better than Boston of old, but you know, we'll see how far they can get. That means everything else though will come through in the following week, because we have play-ins officially starting not this weekend, but the weekend afterwards, September 4th or whatever it is, something like that. And next week's episode is going to be us doing a preview of the play-ins, or the preview of the postseason, in terms of where the play-ins games are going to be, implications for playoffs as well, all that kind of stuff. So look forward to it. We didn't really get to talk about it this episode because we wanted to focus more on some of the other topics. So stay tuned as we get ready for that, and I'm sure next episode will be absolutely fantastic as we head very deep now into the postseason, and there's lots to look forward to. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being part of the show. This is episode 189. Signing out, and we'll see you next week.